This guy is named Kang Jioma. He looks like a basic normal dude, but the truth is, he actually got reincarnated into this world that's literally his favorite game, and he's about to take the entrance exam for the Nobles Academy. Everyone here is loaded, and he is just broke. Right on the first day when he went to register his sword, the professor completely lost it. The guy had to be one of the seniors pulling a major prank, but the kid didn't back down. These are his swords. He is poor and his family can't afford the tuition. The professor then spotted the green badge on the uniform. It was a student who got in through a special admission test, and the prof got all tarried over the kid's hustle. The other rich students were definitely not feeling it. When they heard someone was poor and got in with a special admission, they started griping that the place was smelling. Despite the super hostile vibe, Jioma wasn't fazed. In his past life, he never managed to live a chill life. So, this time he's going to make it happen. He is young and good looking, and even though he awakened a rare ability, it has a weird catch. He can only use swords under 30 centimeters. Talk about being handicapped. When he tested his awakened ability, the power was so intense he felt lightning shoot out of the sword and echo through his whole body. The pain of activating it is too much. If it's like this every time, he's never want using it again. But maybe it's just the first time, like with girls. But testing his ability again, the pain was exactly the same. Near where he was, people were gathering for the ceremony that would set the students' ranks. All the young talents were there, and sitting right at the top was one of the 7 legendary heroes, Siegfried von Nibelung. He is a disciple of Yu Kim, the Academy's founder hero. All the students know and look up to this guy, but the bored old man wasn't pleased. Not even the arrival of another of the 7 heroes cheered him up. This girl, whose curves were more legendary than her title as the Sage of the 7 Heroes, greeted the old man. The girl's name is Media, and Siegfried mocks the girl for being 70 years old and dressing like a youngster. Media didn't take it as an offense. Actually, she took it as a compliment. She also said that if Siegfried accepted her blessing, he would look 10 years younger. The old man refuses. The elderly have to accept their nature. Media has a young essence, and that's why she looks that way. Despite the old man's insults, the girl accepted the invite to watch the Academy's first day. She used to hate these people, but accepted it anyway. The reason is, she is curious to see Siegfried's granddaughter. All the gathered students looked like a sea of colors with their dyed hair. Jioma was the only one with black hair, and the jokes about him not being a noble didn't stop. People forgot all about him when a girl showed up. Her blue hair and attractive aura made the guys turn totally red. Siegfried's granddaughter, the Sword Emperor. The girl is named Abel von Nibelung, and she's the main heroine of this game. The exam was about to kick off. One of the ancient heroes created a place in the Academy called the Subspace. In this place, everyone can be injured and eliminated, but when they return to reality, nothing happens to their bodies. That's why any method of combat is allowed, even the lethal ones. Siegfried and Media say it's an academy tradition. The students who survive the longest get the best rank. The 2 old people were interested in the special student, but the other students were now focused on the student with very special attributes. Jioma could have been one of the guys to join the herd chasing after Abel, but he knows the real deal about this girl and her miraculous blessing. While everyone follows their pheromones, he heads the opposite way. He's even reading a book on how to have a peaceful life in this world. He also remembers that to fight here, he will have to use that darned ability. When it was announced that everyone would be sent to the subspace, all of them were hyped except Jioma. But when it happened, he was determined. After 7 minutes, several students were sent back, leaving everyone shaken by how painful the eliminations were. Media watched closely and noted that Abel took first place. Most people felt this was expected given her famous family. She was very excited to see the performance of Siegfried's granddaughter, but Siegfried himself did not see it the same way. He pointed out that she hadn't broken the Academy record, which he had held for a long time. Just as the old man was about to leave, a heavy, overwhelming feeling hit him like a sharp pain in the stomach. Everyone in the arena felt it. The students looked up at the sky with fear. When Media asked Siegfried if he knew what was happening, even the great hero had no idea. Suddenly, the sky itself began to break. It was an unbelievable sight. 2 people then fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. The arena became deathly silent as Media ordered medical teams to rush to the fallen students. The story then shifts back to a few minutes earlier. While the students were supposed to be fighting one another, it was actually a pair of brothers, beating everyone else up. Because of these 2, the match felt decided from the start. It wasn't a fair fight, it was a death match. Jioma knew exactly who was behind the violence. The evil twins, Mao Jun and Shun Mao. They were 2 brothers with a natural talent for being brutal. For 30 minutes, they had been toying with the weaker students and enjoying the act of hurting them. Jioma looked so weak that the twins didn't even notice him at first. Eventually, all their victims were gone, leaving the brothers bored and looking for a new target. They spotted a single girl shivering in the back and pointed at her. It was clear they had terrible intentions, and Jioma decided he could no longer stay quiet. As Shun Mao walked toward the terrified girl and made a creepy comment about her being his taste, Jioma reached his breaking point. Jioma yelled from the back, catching the twins' attention. He had stepped in without thinking, and now the 2 boys who had ignored him before were staring him down. They saw his special admission name tag and laughed, calling him worthless. They decided to kill him quickly so they could go back to the girl. Facing them both head-on, Gyoma wondered what to do. His painless blessing only lasted for 30 seconds, which wasn't nearly enough time to beat them. He realized he had only one choice left, and the answer was in his bag of sashimi knives. However, he knew that as soon as he held a blade, his blessing would activate, and that unimaginable pain would return. He had wanted a safe, quiet life, but not even half a day had passed before he was in danger. When he reached into his bag and pulled out a knife, causing both brothers burst out laughing. Shun Mao decides not to waste any more time and launches forward to take Gyoma out. This isn't a situation where Gyoma can be picky, but he has a desperate plan. Use his painless blessing for 30 seconds to cancel out the pain from the sword god blessing. All he has to do is hold on. He activates his painless blessing right before drawing the sashimi knife, and once again, the blessing of the sword god flares to life just as Shun Mao descends on him with a wicked smile. There's only one way for Gyoma to survive this. If he can't cut through this situation, he will die. But can a sashimi knife really cut through a person? He remembers asking his old master, an ex-gangster, why gangsters in movies always use them. His master told him it was just movie nonsense. He said, "You can't slash a person like a piece of fish, not even if a god comes down. But the blessing is clear. If he wills it, then he can cut it." Trusting the blessing over his master, Gyoma thrusts his knife towards the large man jumping at him, and in an instant, Shun Mao is sliced clean in half. The other students and the remaining brother, Mao Jun, stare in absolute shock. The quiet, gloomy kid just did the impossible with a simple kitchen knife. Shun Mao's body falls to the ground in 2 pieces. His brother screams. He desperately forces his brain to remember that this is subspace, that Shun Mao isn't really dead. But that doesn't change what he just saw. Mao Jin tells himself that his brother must have been careless. Now, as the remaining twin, he has to pick up the slack. He looks at his brother's fallen body and takes the power gauntlet for himself. With the gauntlet equipped on both hands, its true power awakens. Mao Jun's defense is boosted. His jumping power increases by 200% and his fists hit like a truck. He's confident that not even an S-rank weapon can pierce his defense now. But Gyoma isn't even paying attention to him. He's just focused on the countdown, tracking the seconds he has left before his blessing ends. Mao Jun sees an opening and rushes in for a sucker punch while Gyoma is distracted, and then in a single instant, it's all over. Mao Jun is on the ground, covered in his own blood and barely alive while Gyoma finishes his countdown. The moment it hits 0, the painless blessing ends, and the full agony of the sword god blessing slams into him at once. He screams, still clutching the knife, and finally collapses. Sometime later, Gyoma wakes up in a white room, probably some kind of clinic. Before he can even get up, 2 people walk in. He's never met them, but he knows exactly who they are. 2 of the legendary 7-star heroes, the strongest of humanity, Siegfried, and the Academy's director, Medea Poison. He can't help but wonder why 2 of the most powerful people in the world are here to see him. Medea asks for his name, but Siegfried gets straight to the point, his hand resting anxiously on his sword. He demands to know what on earth Gyoma did. He explains that during the fight, they both felt a powerful sensation that was clearly caused by him. The hostility is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Realizing he's being targeted by the strongest man alive, Gyoma makes a smart move. He first apologizes, saying that his actions went too far, and tells them he's ready to accept any punishment. As the 2 stare each other down, Medea is forced to step in before a fight breaks out. She tells Siegfried to stop scaring the kid, and then reveals something shocking. While Gyoma was unconscious, Siegfried actually cleaned his clogged meridians. Gyoma can't believe the Swordmaster would do that for him. But now that he checks, his body definitely feels a lot lighter. Medea then explains that they reviewed the video and concluded he was just defending a female student in trouble. She can't help but drool a little, calling Gyoma the handsome prince she's been dreaming of, forcing Siegfried to pull her back. The main point, she says, is that she won't give him any grief over his actions. Better yet, the twins had a terrible reputation anyway, and after what Gyoma did, they've both decided to withdraw from the school. That's a huge relief for him, but that isn't all. The real reason they came to see him was to congratulate him for being the top scorer in the whole school. And just like that, Gyoma's dream of a peaceful and safe life has officially become impossible. Later, back in Medea's office, the 2 heroes regroup. She's complaining about something she's never seen in her 2 decades as head of the academy. A student earned the top spot among all the new candidates and then rejected the offer to join the highest class in the school, the star class. They tried to ask him to reconsider, but Gyoma still doesn't want it. Medea asks Siegfried if he's upset that Gama took the top rank instead of his granddaughter. After all, he saw the video and his potential, but Siegfried doesn't agree. He sees this as nothing more than an immature child challenging the system. He says the subspace has the will of the founding hero. If the subspace recognizes Gyoma as number 1, then the academy itself has chosen him as the top pupil, and that won't change. Siegfried also has his own personal thoughts. He sees Gyoma as someone completely strange. If his skills were outstanding, or if his physical abilities were great, or even if he had a little bit of experience, It would make sense, but Siegfried could tell that he had none of that, and yet, as he saw in the video replay, there was a great essence of skill in how Gyoma moved. It represented the ultimate form of swordsmanship, something he has been pursuing his whole life. When he was unblocking Gyoma's acupoints, he sensed how feeble his body was, that he had not yet received any physical training. But it also appeared that something was stored inside him that even the strongest human cannot comprehend. Because of that, he's feeling incredibly competitive towards someone the same age as his granddaughter. Medea, on the other hand, is more focused on the fact that he's quite attractive. She's still smitten that he revealed his skills to save a woman in danger. She jokes that if she were just 10 years younger, she would go after him for sure. Lost in thought, Siegfried stays quiet until she asks him what's on his mind. He doesn't answer and eventually asks her what she thinks students call people like her. Interested, the school administrator tells him to go on. His answer is definitely not what she wants to hear, and she ends up exploding in anger. Meanwhile, Gyoma goes to attend his first class. He had rejected going to the star class, so the best they could downgrade him to was wolf class. Any lower, and the elders would have thrown a tantrum. He originally wanted to be in tiger class, but Medea practically begged him to go to wolf class. In exchange, she promised to keep it a secret that he is the top student in the school. He originally wanted to complete his studies securely in a lower class rather than battling it out in a higher one. Wolf class is a bit high level, but it's still within the range of what he would have expected. Gyoma pushes through the large doors and enters his new classroom. For a moment, all the students look at him with mild curiosity. Then, they notice he is a special admission student, and just like that, no one could care less about him. Gyoma doesn't mind. The fact that they are ignoring him means that Medea kept her part of the deal. Now all he has to do is live the tranquil life he has always dreamed of. He settles down at his desk as a familiar student walks towards him nervously. She shakily thanks him for helping her previously, but Gyoma has no idea who this is. She clarifies that she's the girl he saved during the test. Gyoma brushes her off and tells her that she doesn't need to thank him. After all, he says, anyone else in that situation would have done the same thing. It may look like he saved her, but he feels he actually did it to save himself. Accepting her gratitude would make him feel like a hypocrite. Gyoma changes the topic by introducing himself instead. The girl follows suit and reveals that her name is Chloe. It's an interesting coincidence that they ended up in the same class. Now that introductions are done, Gyoma tries to remember if he has ever heard of a character named Chloe in the game. Maybe she was introduced after he stopped playing, but that makes no sense. When he quit, the game's core narrative was already so far along that introducing a new character would be pointless. It looks like he has run into an extra just like him. Gyoma asks her to keep the incident during the exam a secret. He doesn't want word of his power getting around and ruining his safe and easy lifestyle. Chloe agrees, but then starts to make a request of her own before being cut off by their homeroom teacher, barging into the room with a loud shout. Gyoma tells her to go back to her seat so they can talk later. The teacher, who introduces himself as Lee Wanbin, congratulates the new faces of Wolf class. Since it's their first day, he wants to begin with some basic physical exercise: 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats, as well as 10 laps around the training area. Basically, it's a Saitama split. For the genius nobles who have received vigorous training their whole lives, this is a piece of cake. For Gyoma, though, this is a training regimen that will most certainly make him go bald. He nervously walks up to the teacher after everyone else has left and says he's not feeling strong enough for the training. Surprisingly, not only does the teacher know his name, but he also seems to think incredibly highly of Gyoma. It looks like Medea didn't completely keep her impression of him under wraps. Lee Wanbin also knows Gyoma is allowed to take classes from any level he wants. He denies the opportunity to go to the star class and instead tells the teacher he just wants to go to the toilet for now. And that's how Gyoma is forced to join the tedious exercise with the rest of his classmates. They all run past him with ease while he barely lags behind, already feeling like he's about to pass out. Chloe runs up beside him and notices that he doesn't look so great. She surprisingly tells him that she's on her 9th lap already, gives him a little bit of encouragement, and then zooms off to complete her last one. By the end of the day, Gyoma returns to his dorm room and chugs several bottles of water. He's been at the academy for just a week and has already faced unexpected problems. After the intense training, he ran to the cafeteria only to find out the meals weren't free. When he saw the price for one spicy pork rice, he froze in shock. Just remembering the price now causes him to throw his bottle into a wall in a blind rage. He's almost out of living expenses and severely regrets not accepting the money his father tried to give him. For the past few days, he has been surviving on nothing but the cheapest water from the campus shop. He even misses the complimentary dinners from his army days. For now, all he can do is try to think about something else to forget his hunger. The first thing that comes to mind is his blessing. As usual, the status screen appears, giving him the details. It's gotten a lot longer since last time. His physical level has risen, which has also upgraded the blessing of the sword god, allowing it to activate with slightly longer swords. Now he checks himself out in the mirror, and sure enough, it looks like he has made good physical progress. It's probably because the sword master activated his pressure points. It almost feels like his body has evolved. However, The sword god's blessing still hasn't spread beyond the length of a sashimi knife. If he keeps improving, maybe one day he'll be able to use a small sword. His hands even start to itch when he's not carrying a blade now, probably a result of the blessing. There's a knock on the door. He opens it to see Chloe. She hasn't seen him in the cafeteria and came to check if he's alright. He lies that he doesn't normally consume food made by others, but his internal self practically salivates at the thought of food. Chloe looks disappointed, telling him she was hoping they could have dinner together. Before she can even finish her thought, Gioma is dressed up and calling for her to follow him to buy ingredients. Later that evening, the two have a great meal cooked by Gioma. Chloe is genuinely impressed. Since Chloe grew up near a beach and loves fish, and Gioma's expertise is cooking fish, it's a perfect match. The itch in his hands to grab a knife also hadn't left him, so this is a great time to refresh his skills by slicing some sashimi. The problem is the sword god's blessing. He can't hold a simple kitchen knife without it activating. He asks Chloe if she owns a larger knife, saying it would be awkward to use his own weapons to cook. She heads into her room and comes back with a large sword. Definitely way too large for a simple fish. With no other choice, he is forced to use his blessing. The painless blessing will last for 30 seconds, so he just has to make sure he's fast enough. He was once called the greatest swordsman in his country, and cutting fish has always been his specialty. Now, it's time for him to prove it. He flawlessly slices the fish and manages to finish in 21 seconds, leaving 9 seconds of the painless blessing to spare. The whole thing was done so well that he would call it a masterpiece. Chloe asks how he's so good at cooking, and he confesses that he once worked part-time at a Japanese restaurant. Since she's a noble, she doesn't understand what a part-time job is, and it makes it clear that they are from different social positions. Now that the meal is done, Chloe offers to wash the dishes since he cooked all the food for them, and he moves over to the other side of the room to give her space to clean. For the first time in almost a week, he's full and he can't help but hum in joy. That humming is broken as Chloe accidentally drops a plate behind him. It's most likely because she has never had to clean dishes before, and dropping plates is something that he used to do when he was her age. As he stares out the window and ignores the breaking of plates behind him, a book tumbles off of Chloe's study desk. It looks like it's a diary, and the book coincidentally lands on a page where she writes about him saving her during the class placement test. Her handwriting is cute with rounded shapes and stickers, and he finds himself picking up the book and smiling at it. The wind from the window turns the pages of the book to another part where she writes about meeting him in the same class and being interested in him. He finds it all really cute and can't help himself as he turns through more pages, admiring how cute she is. He turns a few more pages and sees his name again, followed by numerous pages with the words, "I love you," written countless times. Another plate breaks again, and he turns to see Chloe staring at him with blank, scary eyes. She simply asks him if he has read her diary. Chloe's emotionless state isn't a new thing. It's part of her upbringing, and it's more like a self-defense mechanism. Heroes earn respect by defeating demonic beasts, and this allows them to increase their social standing and to gain global reputation. However, within their stagnate ranks, there are certain factions that abuse the weak in the name of authority. When the law is unable to punish these abusers, another group is called from the shadows to take care of these people, and the name of that family is Auditore Sicilia. They are a family that maintains order and carries out assassinations. They are known to work in the shadows while leading towards the light. Those born in the Auditore family have been training for assassinations since before they even reached adolescence. Their emotions are restrained, and they undergo severe training to become perfect assassination machines. Chloe is a part of this blood-stained family, and the first time she soiled her palms with blood was at the age of 15. She has been told all her life to not underestimate her abilities as an assassin, and this has allowed her to become completely conscious of herself. Slowly, her unyielding training distorted her nature, and a gloomy shadow formed over her heart. By the time her identity had been worn down, leaving only traces of emotion, Chloe eventually reached the age to enter the academy. Joaquin Academy is a place where students are placed in different classrooms based on their aptitude. Each student's talent is at least the level of a dragon or higher, but members of the Auditor family who thrived in the shadows were assigned to the common class by their family's decree. That was the agreement between the family and the academy. She was told to remain undetected, and throughout the years of childhood, the family eliminated every individual's liberty. Chloe accepted her fate as an assassin and didn't protest, and she already believed that nothing would alter her fate. That is, until the day she met someone she would never forget. As she stood still and defenseless while the two evil brothers walked towards her, someone who looked like the weakest person in the room stood up to defend her. Even though death in the subspace battle royale is fake, and there is no real risk of dying, this boy still tried to save her. Chloe had quietly accepted death and was waiting for her predestined fate. She had long since given up on meaningless struggles, and she was trained to act in a meek and unnoticeable manner. But somehow, thanks to the boy's intervention, it's like the sun had broken through the clouds in her mind, and she watched as the boy used his sword not to assassinate, but in self-defense and to protect her. Right as she saw him fighting for her, she remembered a children's fairy tale she read aloud under her pillow in secret. The tale told of a princess imprisoned in a castle that was rescued by a prince. As the memories of the fairy tale came to her mind, Her chest tingles and her cheeks became red. This unidentifiable feeling in her was most certainly love. Now Gioma has committed the ultimate sin by looking into the private thoughts of this girl. As she stares him down, he tries to, but he knows deep down that he is screwed. He tries to figure out exactly how he got into this situation. Was it when he took the pure sentiments of a teenage girl, or maybe the moment he foolishly followed her because she offered to feed him? No matter how he found himself staring at death itself in the form of a teenage girl, his first priority should be getting out of here. He changes the topic, commenting on how lovely the moon is before casually trying to find a way to leave the room without getting his head chopped off. She doesn't let him finish his sentence and asks him again if he saw her diary. He tries to play it off, pretending that he only saw her reference book and compliments the amount of effort she put into studying. But none of that flattery will save his life right now. He can't even believe that she saw him reading it in the first place, since she was busy washing dishes while he was peeking through it. And she has even abandoned the formal speech she was using to talk to him before. It's almost like she has become an entirely different person out of nowhere. He promises that he didn't see it, but she pesters him until finally he admits that he saw it. As soon as he says that, Chloe decides that his life must end, and she pulls out the same sword that she offered him before to cut the fish. Gioma looks around and weighs his options. They are currently on the 4th floor, so jumping out of the window isn't an option. The only way out for him is through the front door, but Chloe definitely won't let him just walk out of here. At least not with his limbs attached. She really is coming towards him with the sword, and it looks like his time is running out. He tries to figure out why she's suddenly acting this way, and he can only think of one possibility. Her unmoving pupils and her dark red eyes can only mean one thing. He's dealing with a textbook yandere, but if he takes into account her sudden shift in attitude from an adorable little strawberry to a fierce killer, it gets even worse. She's a yandere with a dual personality. Managing her yandere characteristics alone will definitely be difficult, but adding a dual personality disorder to it makes things even worse. It looks like her change in personality was triggered by him opening her diary. This might be harmful, but he's sure that she'll pursue him until the day he passes away if he doesn't do something to snap her out of it. He has to find a way to secure his future by taking the initiative today, else things are only going to get worse for him. The only way he's making it out of here alive is if he gets a weapon, but he only has 9 seconds remaining after using 21 seconds to slice the fish. His sashimi knife is still in his room, but he can use the kitchen knife from earlier. There's no way he's going to be able to reach that without his arms getting severed though. He looks around again and notices a box cutter on her study desk. There's nothing else he can use, but there's no way this little thing is enough to activate the blessing of the sword god. Chloe finally rushes him with a sword, and it looks like there's only one way to find out. He grabs the box cutter, and then unloads the blade. Numerous status screens pop up in front of him. Being resourceful in a situation like this increases his mental resilience, and he temporarily gains an intimidation buff. The system then makes necessary adjustments before activating the blessing. Chloe rushes at him with her sword right as Gioma pulls back with the box cutter. Before she can cut him down, he tells her that her hair is a little long. Thanks to the intimidation buff, Chloe freezes for a moment right as Gamma unleashes the blade. Everything goes dark and fuzzy, and by the time Chloe wakes up later in the evening, her room is dark, tidy, and empty. Her thoughts immediately go to Gioma, and she wonders where he went off to. She calls out to him a few times, but the silence confirms that she is alone in her room. The last thing she remembers is sneaking looks at him while he was looking out of her window, but everything is fuzzy after that. She suddenly feels the need to look for her katana, but she sees it leaning against her study desk. She sometimes loses consciousness whenever she holds her katana, but it looks like she managed to hold herself together this time. At least that's what she thinks anyway. Back when she was younger and still honing her skills, she would lose consciousness when holding her blade, and by the time she would come to her place would be covered in blood, and her elders would dismiss her whenever she would ask what she did while passed out. They would always remind her not to deny her talent as an assassin. Still, the fact that she can't remember what she did with Gioma makes her feel embarrassed, and she buries her head in her bed in shame. But that shame quickly turns to something else entirely, as she starts thinking about Gioma. Then she notices the box cutter laying on the floor, and also that her hair looks shorter. Inside her trash bin, she also sees some of her hair neatly cleaned up. That's when she realizes that he must have helped her cut her hair, and she opens up her journal to write about her love for him a little more. Gioma, on the other hand, isn't nearly as lovesick as Chloe is at the moment. In fact, right now, he can barely believe that he's even alive. Behind an inconspicuous wall at the far side of the college, he throws up the food that he was just praising Chloe for feeding him. He barely managed to go past the first 5 seconds after the 9 seconds of his painless blessing ended. And even then, he still feels incredibly sick, and after throwing up his only good meal in over a week, Gioma sits on a bench and contemplates what to do next. Now he's hungry again and feeling even worse than he did before Chloe came to visit. His mind drifts to Chloe again, and he starts to wonder who exactly she is. Her swordsmanship is clearly honed to cut off an opponent's life with a single strike, or at least subdue them. The way Chloe wields her sword, it's like she is persistently aiming for the vital spots, almost as if her technique is specialized in assassination. If she had caught him off guard, Gioma certainly wouldn't have survived. He felt like his life was being threatened, so he instinctively aimed for her neck. Fortunately, the knife was too short, so he only managed to cut her hair. Before he left, he cleaned up the mess, so there shouldn't be any problems later. But this is just further proof that keeping his peaceful and safe life isn't as simple as it looks. Apparently, being ordinary is the hardest thing for him. When he was first thrown into this game, it's not like he didn't have any ambition. In his past life, he once reached the pinnacle of skill with nothing but a sashimi knife. So, it's not like he could easily let go of his dreams. But everyone has a role to play, and in this world, he was summoned as a background character. Miracle Blessing is the title of the game, as well as the name of the protagonist's blessing. It was also the blessing of the founding hero, Valor Jaken. In the whole game, the protagonist and the founding hero were the only two people to ever possess the legendary blessing, and the description of the blessing was straightforward. They are to save the world from the Demon King. So, the protagonist gets chosen by Balmong, which is an SS sword that is both holy and cursed. Meanwhile, all Gioma has is a lowly, rankless sashimi knife. There's nothing else to say. He's just bound for a life of obscurity. The endless stream of extraordinary people and situations that he has faced since entering the academy almost made him forget about his goal. There were plenty of reasons to give up on the goal of a simple life, and it's even more apparent now that it seems like there isn't even one normal person in the entire world. Since he has played the game before, he has a rough grasp of the key characters in the game, but his knowledge of the world itself is limited. It's already been a week since he joined the academy at this point, which means that the protagonist should have already awakened his blessing and begun the late admission process. This is when the game story actually begins, and Gioma knows the general plot, but he never played it to the end. For the first time, he actually regrets quitting the game halfway through. But still, since he knows the canon route up to the first half of the story, that already gives him a big advantage. All he has to do is stick to the canon route no matter what. If he starts meddling in everything, then he'll end up losing the only advantage that he has. From his memory, he knows that the storyline takes a sudden dark turn around the second semester of the third year, which is when the demons realize that the hero has awakened, and they launch an attack on the academy led by a legion commander. As the fight escalates, the demons and the humans spiral into an all-out war, and from there, the game story turns into a typical fantasy novel. Back when he was playing it, he just wanted to emulate the carefree, simple, youthful life that he never experienced as a teenager. So, he deleted the game without a second thought. The problem is that now he's part of the world that is destined for war, and there's a very real possibility that he might die. He still has 3 years before then, though, and he needs to stop running from reality so he can focus on what's possible. He won't let himself die, and he will focus on growing stronger so he can survive. Besides, cliché games like this one always have happy endings where the protagonist manages to save the world. All he needs is enough strength to protect himself, so he can't let himself be some helpless weakling that gets killed off. He just needs to train enough to protect himself while keeping as low a profile as possible. To do that, he will have to minimize his use of the blessing of the sword god, because just the few times he has had to rely on it has put immense strain on his body. It's a powerful ability, but it comes with way too many drawbacks for his liking. Thinking about the blessing once again activates a status window that gives him information about it. Weirdly enough though, there are new entries to the information that he didn't notice before. The 3 new entries are a body, mind, and armament grade, and the numbers beside them seem to be levels. They all reflect how much he has grown, and each one will lessen the strain of his blessing on his body. There's also one more called synchronization, but he has no idea what it means, and its description is just some question marks. He tries tapping on it, but access to it is denied because he has not met the relevant conditions. That's another puzzle to add to this mysterious blessing, but it's not important right now. His main priority at the moment should be improving his body and finding a new weapon. He can't depend on the 30 seconds of the painless blessing forever. So, he also needs to learn to wield a sword that doesn't meet the condition of the blessing. Luckily, there's a monster hunting training for the midterms that's happening in a month. The reward for the training is the long sword Morsame. It's a B-tier weapon that should serve him until graduation. It's also too big for his blessing to activate, meaning that it's the perfect weapon for him. There's a lot to figure out, but it already feels like he's making good progress. While lost in thought, a voice calls out to him suddenly. He looks up, and staring back down at him is someone he never expected to see or talk to. It's Abel von Nibelung, the granddaughter of the Sword Emperor, and the one person that he really shouldn't be interacting with if he wants to avoid changing the game story. She tells him that he's on her seat, but he's too stunned to get up for a moment, forcing her to yell at him before he finally gets the message and slides away to give her space. He still can't get over just how pretty Abel is, and he caught himself staring without even noticing. As he tries to leave, she tells him that he doesn't have to go. He can just shuffle over a bit instead. It's weird that she'd call a public bench her seat, but he lets it go since he doesn't really want to get involved with her. He still can't help staring at her, and just as he would expect from the heroine of the game, she really is gorgeous. Suddenly, she starts talking, and that startles Gioma back to the present. This is definitely way too odd, since the Abel that he knows is usually standoffish and doesn't talk to people. Even the handsome protagonist of the game couldn't get her to warm up to him. She continues talking, asking him if he also uses a blade as his weapon, and he sheepishly answers her before asking how she knows. She tells him that her grandpa once told her that swordsmen have a different look in their eyes. Then she shows him her sword and asks if he wants to hold it. He's still feeling a bit odd about the whole thing, so he declines the offer, but that just makes her pout in annoyance. It looks like he hurt her feelings, but he just can't get used to her talking to him. Then she asks him if he knows her. Gioma is surprised at first, but that's an odd question for her to ask. There's no one in the school who doesn't know who she is. He answers her in a blank way, saying that he sort of knows her, but then she tells him that she doesn't know him. She considers that a bit unfair, the fact that he knows her, but she has no clue who he is. Gioma doesn't agree since they have only just met, so it's not important if they know each other's names, but she tells him that he could be a spy sent by the Demon King who's sneaking into the academy, dressed as a student. It's quite suspicious that he's out here alone this late at night. Gioma then throws the question back at her and asks her why she's out so late at night. It's obvious though from her clothes and weapon that she just finished training and working out. She tells him that she did breathing exercises and then points at him as she talks, unintentionally, giving Gioma a full view of the scars on her hands. She hurriedly hides her hands, but Gioma has already seen them. They are signs of her hard work, and Abel agrees with that since it's obvious that she, of all people, would be working hard. People don't understand what it means to belong to the Nibelung bloodline. They are expected to always be at their best and to be flawless. One slip up, and they could become a target. Abel then reveals that she is not the top student of the year, and this is the first time that she has ever lost to someone in her life. But somehow, even though she should be upset, she feels strangely liberated. She can't help wondering who exactly beat her and became the top scorer though. She would love to meet them so she can tear them apart. That causes Gioma to cough out in shock, and he asks her why she would go that far. The reason is because she feels humiliated. She begged her grandfather to tell her who that person is, but apparently the person isn't even in her class. On top of that, they also skipped the speech, which means she had to do it in there instead, and that only felt even more embarrassing as the second place. She stops herself before she goes even further with her ranting. It's odd of her to decide to share all this information with someone she just met. On that note, Gioma finally asks the question that has been on his mind this entire time. He wants to know why she's talking to him in the first place, considering her personality and how she usually feels about others. The reason is definitely not what he expected. It's because he looks weak. It's her family's motto to be unyielding to the strong and merciful to the weak, and all her classmates are already unbearable enough, so she doesn't have any friends. That would explain why she's so cold to the protagonist in the game. With that done, Abel gives a little stretch, then prepares to leave. As she gets up, she pauses for a moment, and then asks him if he really isn't going to tell her his name. Just like before, Gioma refuses, with no room for negotiation. Time continues to pass, and to Gioma's surprise, he continues his academy life without any trouble. Chloe seems to have made some new friends apart from him, and she has settled into the class just fine, and Gioma has been keeping himself busy by avoiding her ever since the incident in her room. Sometimes when their eyes meet, her new friends look at him with disdain because of his status as a special entrant, but Gioma has managed to stop caring about people that look down on him for being a special entrant. After all, he's not the only special entrant in their class anyways. Although there aren't many of them in the class, they have all been really good at avoiding each other. There's definitely some kind of inferiority complex at play, but Gioma is sure that things would be so much worse if he was placed in a higher tier class. By now, the students in the Star and Dragon classes have most likely split into factions and become wrapped up in petty power struggles. Even back when he played the game, it was pretty shocking to experience. But now that he's living in this world, just the thought of being in that world sends a shiver through his spine. In good news though, he has been getting proper meals now. That's thanks to something that Medea gave to him the other day as a special privilege for being the top scorer in the school. He gets a faculty card that allows him to eat whatever he wants from the cafeteria for free. He's so thankful for this little gift that bowing to the director's office 3 times a day doesn't feel like enough to express his gratitude. On top of that, he has been fulfilling his duties as a student pretty well, all while making sure that he hasn't done anything that could negatively affect the main storyline. All he has to do is keep it this way for the next 3 years, and his life will go smoothly. The days go by smoothly, and Gioma attends all his classes without any problems. During one of his classes, an elderly teacher educates the students about the hero Balor Joaquin, who founded the academy after recognizing the need to train the next generation of heroes. Gioma pretty much knows about all of this from the games already. The founding hero, Balor Joaquin, faced Lycan, the Demon King's right-hand man and the commander of the First Legion. The battle went on for 20 years, and in the end, the hero emerged victorious. However, Balor Joaquin lost one of his arms as a consequence for his victory, and as a result, he could no longer fight. The war was filled with carnage and bloodshed, and although the hero won the battle, there was no clear winner of the war on either side. And just like that, the first human-demon war ended in a truce. In order to train the next generation, Joaquin founded the academy, and a non-aggression pact was signed between the two races. That pact is the reason that there have been 700 years of peace that still stands till today. The students are sure that they won't see any war in their lifetime, but Gioma is the only one that knows that the peace will be broken. Everyone is so used to the calm at this point, and it's no surprise. The only person he would want to warn about the impending doom would be Medea, but doing so would also alter the canon route, and he has no idea what that would lead to. Despite constantly complaining about wanting to leave her position as an academy director, Medea was one of the first to notice that something was about to happen, thanks to her blessing of perception. In order to protect her students, she was the first among the 7 stars to step onto the front lines. But Gioma never played the game to that point. However, he did learn of her fate from reading the game's fandom wiki. Medea was the first of the 7 stars to fall in battle against the Demon King's army. Knowing this makes it hard to keep the war a secret, but he wishes that he never knew in the first place. The class ends and students start to head out to the school halls because of some sort of commotion going on out there. It looks like it's finally time for things to start, and Gioma takes a moment to check his phone. Just like he thought, it's the 5th of May, and today is the day that the protagonist will finally join the school. He joins the group of students crowding at the class door, and they are all in awe of him, and some are already certain that he's going to join the star class. Just as he suspected, the protagonist of the game walks through the halls as people part for him to move. Leon Van Reinhardt walks with a confident aura among his fellow students, but Gioma knows that today is the day that the peace that lasted 700 years would start to crumble. Gioma watches as everyone in the school seems to fawn over him, but he already knew that this would happen. After all, in the game, every woman seems to fall for him. If this were an adult-rated game, Leon would definitely have been dead before facing the Demon King. Among all the women that are seemingly drawn to him, the ones who become his party members are also pretty impressive. It's annoying to think about, but Leon Van Reinhardt, the protagonist of Miracle Blessing M, will be among the first to get drafted in 3 years. Although he calls it a draft, it's more like a mandatory enlistment, and if Gioma gets drafted as well, this will also be his second time in the army. But the hero only barely managed to seal the 1st Legion commander, which only makes Gioma wonder how strong the Demon King is. There's no way that protagonist is going to lose, right? As he wonders about all of this, his eyes lock with Leon, and the protagonist smiles charmingly at him, almost as if he's reassuring Gioma without knowing what he's thinking. He's the protagonist after all. There's no way he won't be able to handle these kinds of threats. Gioma turns to walk away from the scene, but suddenly someone calls him from behind. It's Chloe, and she meekly asks if she did something wrong. He'd love to tell her that she almost cut off his head, but they will be spending the next year together, and it would suck if he made things awkward between them. He lies that there's no problem between them in hopes of keeping things civil so he doesn't end up making any unnecessary enemies. Chloe at least seems relieved, and she's back to acting cute just like he remembers, which is so different from the murderous psychopath he faced that day. Despite her being unconscious, he could tell that her swordsmanship is filled with sorrow. It's as if it was a blade pleasing to be saved, and yet, the killing intent radiating from the edge is so intense that it made his skin crawl. If the purpose of her swordsmanship is simply for killing, then she's probably more dangerous than the Mao siblings. He's snapped from his thoughts when she asks to treat him to dinner again tonight. She wants to treat him, but she warns that she's not as good at cooking as he is. The mention of having dinner with her again brings those thoughts of her bloodlust back to mind, and he almost instinctively wants to refuse her. But the puppy dog eyes of a cute girl are a terrifying weapon. It's almost impossible for him to say no to a face that cute, and he feels bad for even thinking of refusing. But if he doesn't refuse, he might wake up in a fridge tomorrow morning. Instead of dinner though, he has a better idea for them to spend time together. He asks her for a favor and tells her that she's the only one that can do it for him, and that caused Chloe to become docile immediately. Gioma wants her to teach him swordsmanship, and he needed a sword instructor anyway. Later in the school's training grounds, he swings a wooden sword while testing his own limits. Just as he expected, because of the size of the sword, it doesn't affect the blessing. Now all he needs to do is try to develop some swordsmanship skills. Chloe is insanely strong. She'd be the perfect person to train him. This is also a pretty good excuse for him to avoid going to dinner with her again. Ever since that day, he made sure to watch a video called Surviving a Yandere before going to bed. Somehow, it looks like it has helped him in dealing with Chloe for the meantime. Chloe walks up to him in casual clothes with her katana attached at her hip. He just arrived since they planned to meet at 8, but she's been waiting for him since 6. Gioma takes a moment to admire her, and her crop top gives him a good view of her muscles. He couldn't notice it before because he only ever saw her in a school uniform, but that would explain why she's so strong. He gives her another wooden sword, and Chloe is confused that they aren't using real swords. There's no way that they can train with real swords, and they are definitely not fighting with their lives on the line, so there's no need for them to use real weapons. Chloe gladly takes the wooden sword from him and tests the swing, and the power of her thrust with the sword is enough to send a small shockwave crashing between them. She's so strong that the air around them is trembling just from that strike, and Gioma starts to get second thoughts about asking her to train him. For now, he needs to err on the side of caution. Before their training starts, he decides to check his blessing one more time. The sword's length isn't an issue, thankfully, and his body has been growing steadily. But now that he thinks about it, it's odd for a blessing to upgrade with experience. He doesn't remember if blessings also come with additional side effects, and he also has no idea how much more he needs to grow before the mysterious hidden trait shows up. Chloe walks up to him and asks him what's wrong, and he's reminded of the fact that only he can see his status screen. To her, he must have looked like a crazy guy who's spacing out. He turns to start their training and nervously asks Chloe to go easy on him since today is their first day. Then he readies himself with his sword and faces Chloe. In his past life, he learned everything through hands-on experience. He firmly believes that to master something, you can't just give a piece of yourself. You have to be ready to sacrifice your entire being. The reason he adapted so quickly in the academy is because of the training that he received in his class. He learned from a young age how to read when he's growing and when he's stagnant. And even now, he can tell that things aren't perfect in both his stance and his grip on his sword. However, even with all of that, the final stroke of the sword must always strike the opponent. He opens his eyes to begin the duel and sees Chloe already rushing towards him at full force. He barely has time to dodge her first strike as Chloe switches her stance and launches another attack, which he is barely able to parry. Somehow, as the fight continues, she seems to keep getting faster, and Gioma is barely able to keep up with her pace. And on top of all of that, she might even be holding back since he told her to go easy on him. Her sword clashes with his again, and this time, the wood begins to crack from the force. Her relentless onslaught of attacks doesn't slow down though, and she continues to strike while he barely manages to parry and dodge. With how much force she's using, if he gets hit by even one of her attacks, he might actually die, and he can't find any opening to counterattack. But before he can even figure out how to counterattack, his sword has finally had enough and it breaks in half. Chloe tries to apologize and tells him that she was going as gently as she could be. She still ended up breaking it. That is the least of her worries though, because the sword has reduced in size and length, which means that, unfortunately for her, the sword meets the conditions for the sword god blessing to activate. However, there's something terribly wrong. The weapon has been damaged, which causes an error in the system. The suppressive force that usually holds back the full power of the blessing instead starts altering Gioma's personality. By the time the alteration is done, his humanity level has decreased, leaving Gioma as a fighting shell. The sword god's divine blessing fully activates as Gioma turns to her with his half-broken wooden sword as a menacing aura builds around him. Chloe steps back as Gama's entire attitude clearly starts to change. While Gioma's body seems to move on autopilot, inside Gioma's mind, he's returned to his past body and finds himself in his kitchen. Everything feels like a dream, and right now, all he can think about is cleaning and cutting the fish that has appeared in front of him. He doesn't remember what he was doing before this, but right now, he just has to get back to work. It's been a while since he has worked on a fish like this, so he decides to cut the fish using a Chinese cleaver this time. As he tries to pick it up, a message pops up informing him that he can't pick it up. Since that's not working, he tries to pick up the knife, but once again, a message pops up telling him that he can't pick it up. There's only one option left, and it's the sashimi knife. That's the only blade that the system allows him to pick up, but he remembers that if he holds the sashimi knife, then it's going to hurt. However, he picks it up, and it's completely fine. In fact, he even feels refreshed, if anything. A voice speaks up in his head, telling him to just accept the situation and let things go. In the real world, Gioma continues to approach Chloe with the knife. She tries to call out for him, but he continues walking towards her with obvious bloodlust. Suddenly, he rushes towards her, and Chloe is just barely able to block his attack with her sword. He pushes against her sword and sends her flying backwards and crashing into a wall. He suddenly feels completely different from when they were sparring before. He jumps towards her and tries to stab her with the sharp end of his stake, but she barely jumps back and avoids the hit. Chloe only got hit with one attack, but she can barely move. She can't figure out how Gioma became this way all of a sudden, but she has to find a way to stop the spar before he ends up accidentally killing her. She tries to ask him again to stop, but Gioma doesn't respond and launches at her again. He's moving so fast that there's no way she's going to be able to avoid it at her current state. All she can do is continue begging him to stop, and eventually, she shouts out his name right as the sword strikes down straight towards her head. Back in Gioma's dream world, he wonders why the fish he has been trying to cut is avoiding him. The fish also seems to be making a lot of ois while bouncing around, and he can just barely tell what it's saying. It sounds like it's calling out someone's name. The sound becomes less fuzzy until he can just barely hear the fish calling out for someone named Gioma. Chef Kim's mind starts to clear, and eventually he realizes that he is Gioma, and the fish is calling for him. He's just barely able to realize what's right as he is about to stab Chloe with the broken sword. Just before the wood can pierce her skin, Gioma throws the sword, slamming it into a wall. Just before he accidentally kills his friend, Chloe opens her eyes and sees Gamma holding her and smiling down at her because he's no longer holding the sword. The blessing has ended, and he's back to his senses. Chloe nervously asks if he is alright, and he calmly tells her that he's fine, and then turns to leave while thanking her for helping him to train. After he leaves, Chloe makes her way back to her dorm room as well. She's had a feeling since the entrance exam, but Gioma's capabilities are more peculiar than strong. When she fought him, she could tell he wasn't fighting with skill, but just raw instinct. Even though he subconsciously activated his divine blessing, she was no match for him. Even with that half-wooden sword, he managed to completely overpower her. As she walks through the campus, someone peeks out from the shadows and comments that Chloe looks quite content. This mysterious newcomer is Nox's editor, and also Chloe's older brother. Nox mocks her for hanging out with a lowly person after joining the academy. Chloe knows that he's talking about Gioma, and warns him not to talk about her friend like that. Nox didn't even know his name until now, but warns Chloe that she should avoid loitering around with him unless the Aviator family will erase him. Chloe turns and walks away and tells Nox that even if the Aviator comes, they will be no match for Gioma. As Chloe walks away, Nox wonders about this guy that has changed his sister so drastically. Speaking of Gioma, as he walks home, he also takes a moment to think about his blessing. The power he has been given is a far cry from the blessing or a favor from a god. It's more like a curse, if anything. In order not to rely on the sword god's blessing, he tried to find new weapons, and yet that power chased after him and even took control of his body, as if mocking his efforts to not rely on it. When he fought Chloe, he felt no pain, and instead, he felt pleasure, as if he was intoxicated. Just like a curse, the blessing toyed around with him like a puppet, and it whispered sweet words into his ear, telling him to slash, cut, and destroy. Because of that, he gave up his body right until Chloe's screams dragged him out of his daze. Thanks to that, he suddenly remembered his own name, and he returned to reality. Thanks to that, he regained consciousness just long enough to throw the wooden sword away, because he felt like he would lose more of himself forever if he didn't get rid of it as fast as possible. It's funny to think that Chloe, a yandere, who almost killed him not too long ago, is now the girl that managed to pull him out of his daze. He was pissed off that she broke the sword in the first place, but in the end, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. That's why he didn't make a fuss when he returned to reality. He was terrified of activating the sword god's blessing again, but today proves that he can't just ignore this issue for the rest of his life. This gift is something he has to deal with for the rest of his life, and it's the reason that his wish to live life normally will most likely never be fulfilled. As he practically crawls his way back to his room, Gioma realizes that there is something in him that is trying to devour his sense of reason. This definitely isn't a blessing. It's a curse that is trying to consume him whole. 3 days later, classes continue as usual, and Chloe chats with her new friends, but something is clearly wrong. Since they had that duel, Gioma has not been coming to class, and they never shared their contact info, so she hasn't even been able to check on him. Every time she went to his dorm, the only thing that she would hear in response to her knocks were pained groans. She considered breaking the door down, but she feared that he would end up hating her for it. She likes watching him from her seat during class, and she lost track of how many times she would secretly glance at him during the day. At first, she thought she was drawn to him because he risked his life for her, but that's probably just an excuse at this point. Whatever the reason that she's drawn to him now, she just misses him. The next day, Gioma still hasn't shown up to class by the time the teacher is yelling at everyone to settle down and be quiet. It's raining today, so the teacher tells them that they will be having a study hall instead of training. As the students start to make their way to their seats, he too also notices that Gioma has not shown up for several days. However, knowing him, there has to be some reason for it. So, the instructor decides to just wait patiently for him to return on his own. As he disciplines his students, the doors to the class creak open, and Gioma calmly struts in with a completely new look. Chloe stands out of her seat in shock as Gioma apologizes to the instructor for being late to class. His eyes are sunken and look almost dead, while a strand of hair on his head has turned pale white. Even the instructor is a bit shocked at Gioma's new look, just like the rest of the students, and he nervously tells Gayama to sit down. The students remark that Gioma looks different and oddly more handsome. By the end of the day, the other students leave the class to go about their business while Chloe approaches Gioma for the first time in 4 days. She nervously asks him what happened and why he didn't show up for a long while, and he stays quiet for a bit before telling her that he just felt a little bit sick and not to worry about him. From her shaky voice, he can tell that she doesn't believe his words completely, but there's nothing else he can do to convince her. For the past 3 days, he went through something similar to extreme withdrawal symptoms, until he was mentally exhausted. He couldn't get out of his room or eat anything, so he just buried himself in his bed while praying that his convulsions would go away. The pain he suffered during this time was far worse than before, and all of this was a price for using the broken weapon. On top of that, when he glanced in the mirror, even though his appearance seemed the same, his expression was far more sunken, and his hair seemed to be turning white. All of this was very clearly a penalty from the sword god. Chloe seems guilty, and it's probably because the last time she saw him was at the training grounds, so she must think that this is somehow her fault. To calm her down, He asks her if she's still interested in having that dinner with him like she wanted before. That shocks Chloe even more than him coming back to class, and she nearly rushes him in a hug. It looks like that was the right choice, because she seemed to really like that suggestion. She asks him what he would like to eat, and the first thing that comes to his mind is fish. As they talk, a strange sensation passes through him, and he turns to see someone staring at them from the end of the hall. It's Chloe's brother Nox, and the atmosphere changes as soon as they see him. Gioma goes directly to confront the newcomer and tells him that instead of staring, he should come in and talk to them. Right away, Gioma notices something wrong with the guy's eyes, but Chloe tries to get in between them before something crazy happens. Her voice is shaky, and there's definitely some hesitation in how she's acting, but she's still trying to protect him in her own way. Nox asks Chloe if this is really the guy she's choosing to break Auditore's rules for. Chloe tells him that she wants nothing to do with her family, but her brother reminds her that she can't just wash the blood off her hands. If someone is born as an auditor, then they will always be an auditor. Chloe is speaking as if she's a rebel, and the brother is speaking as if he's from a historical drama, but Gioma is just annoyed by the whole thing. Nox continues to insult Gioma, and that finally causes Chloe to snap. She yells for Nox to stop talking about the man she loves like that, and her angry voice surprises even him. Gioma hoped that this whole thing could at least be done in moderation, but he's starting to get used to these disruptions in his life. The more important thing is the Auditor. He knows that they are a group that works in the shadows and specializes in assassination, and they show up in the middle of the game to play a major role. It's said that they are weaker compared to other heroic houses, but they are unrivaled in assassination. All the members of the Auditor clan are ridiculously strong thanks to their abusive training regimen, which they all undergo from childhood, which molds them into cutting-edge assassination tools. For Chloe to be from this assassination group, that means her cute and bubbly personality makes her the abnormal one in this situation. Unlike her brother, Nox has an expression that shows that he's used to killing, and although Gioma has nothing against that, it looks like Chloe wants to lead a normal life instead. Just like his blessing of the sword god, the environment of the Auditor is something that Chloe had no say in being a part of. She's destined to live a life as an emotionless murderer, and that's almost unfortunate to think about. Gioma doesn't think he's a hero, and he has no intention of ever becoming one. But even if he can't save the world, he can at least try to save the life of one girl. He steps between Chloe and her brother and confronts Nox directly. In the end, he tried escaping the sword god's blessing, but he couldn't. So instead, he'll take a step forward and embrace this curse. After all, the name Gioma means sword demon. With that, he walks past the two assassin siblings and tells Nox to follow him. Meanwhile, Lee Wonbin sits in his office with thoughts of his student running through his mind. When Gioma came to class that morning, it was very obvious that something had happened to him. His expression was void of emotion, and he looked deeply troubled. As he's thinking to himself, one of his fellow instructors walks into the room cheerfully, while also remarking on the man's baldness. Before they can keep talking, Lee Wonbin gets a call from the administrators, and they want his permission to allow a student of his to use the subspace. Lee Wonbin desperately asks to know which of his cadets requested to use the subspace all of a sudden, and they confirm that it is Kang Gioma who requested it, hoping to face Nox Auditory. The stage is set for Gioma and Nox's fight, and our MC waits patiently in the room with 15 minutes left before the fight starts. He thought the process to get access to the subspace would be complicated, but it went by pretty quickly. It's definitely thanks to Medea, who at least wanted him to be safe while fighting a professional assassin. At least since he won't be fighting in reality, that means that he doesn't have to worry about physical injuries, but there's still a pretty good chance that he could suffer mental ones. However, none of that matters as long as he can win. He can hear all the noise in the arena from the waiting room, and it looks like the fight between the two students managed to draw some unintended buzz. It's almost ironic that he was trying his best not to stick out before, but right now, that all feels pointless. Beside him, Chloe is practically drowning in grief and guilt. She's probably blaming herself for this whole situation, and Gioma tries to assure her that it really isn't her fault, and she even lent him some gear, so everything will turn out alright in the end. She tells him that Nox is really strong, and he's a genius with unmatched talent in the entire history of the Auditor family. When it comes to the dark arts, there's no one that's up to his level, and at the age of 14, he was already dubbed the pinnacle of the dark arts. That's a pretty cringy name, but it does show how strong he is. Gioma stares down at the rose-colored blade in his hand as he remembers the decisions that led him up to this point. His old teacher always used to tell him that he is destined to wield a blade for his whole life. He never expected that he would still be running around with a sashimi knife even in his next reincarnation. An announcement comes over the speaker informing the students that the subspace battle is about to begin. He gets up to leave the locker room, but not before reassuring Chloe one more time that he is going to win. He steps out into the arena and is immediately bombarded by the excited cheering of his fellow students. Gioma feels like he's one of those gladiators from the Roman Empire, with how intense the atmosphere has become. Over in the distance, he can also see that the entire star class is attending as well, including the main cast of characters from the game. Nox walks into the AS well and immediately calls his attention. It looks like the assassin is insulted that Gioma would dare come to challenge him with a girly kitchen knife. This guy's killing intent is no good, and it would be best that Gioma tries his best to avoid provoking him. So, naturally, Gioma taunts him even more by telling him that a true master never blames their equipment. Nox pulls out his blade, an S-rank sword called the Two Hungrian Blades. On top of the powerful equipment, he also has one of the best auras in the game, the Blessing of the Crow. However, Gioma has also come prepared with dual discount-grade kitchen knives. Truly, this will be a fight for the ages. The subspace barrier is deployed, and before it is even fully active, the two students leap at each other. Gioma activates the Painless Blessing as he uncovers the two knives, which activates the Sword God's Blessing. The people in the stands watch in awe as they can barely see anything going on in the arena. This was supposed to be an easy match where a special admission student would get demolished by an accomplished assassin, but with how fast the two of them are going, the students can't even keep track of what's going on. The students from Star Class are also surprised by how interesting this fight has suddenly gotten, especially Abel, who can't believe that the person she labeled as weak has such fighting prowess. Their swords continue to clash, and Gioma is effortlessly dodging all of Nox's attacks. The assassin gets frustrated and launches another attack that's so fast it creates 3 after images of him. Somehow though, despite the attacks hitting Gioma head-on, he still manages to come out of it unscathed. The students watching are praising Nox's strength and speed, and they see this battle as Gioma running away from every attack. But Abel knows the truth that no one else can see. Only those who can clearly see the match will understand what's happening. Somehow, Gioma is perfectly dodging every single one of Nox's attacks, almost like he's not even trying to fight. Meanwhile, Nox is getting even more agitated since he even used his Blessing of the Crow, thinking that it would be enough to annihilate him. But Gioma somehow managed to everything like it was nothing. Now that Nox has seen for himself how skilled Gioma is, he decides to be more cautious and aim for a powerful strike that can slice through a wide area in just one go. Gioma suddenly drops the sashimi knife that he brought with him and holds the rosy blade that was given to him by Chloe. Just looking at the confidence in his stance makes Nox even angrier, and he doesn't think a nobody like Gioma should have the nerve to act like a big shot. As Gioma charges his attack, Nox also activates a powerful attack aimed to our MC with a single strike. Before he can even move though, Gioma goes on the offensive, and in a flash, the match is decided. Gioma wanted to live a comfortable life, and to achieve that, he stuck to the rules and tried not to stand out as much as possible. Now, he has given his body up to the Sword God with the sole aim of cutting Nox up so cleanly that he wouldn't even be able to see if he was cut at all. The whole crowd falls deadly silent as Nox's arm, still holding one of his blades, flies through the air and falls limply to the ground. This is the beginning of Kang Gioma's origin, and it's the moment he says goodbye to his peaceful future. Gioma turns around and finishes the job, slicing Nox cleanly into pieces and officially ending the battle. The subspace barrier gets turned off, and the crowd is still in stunned silence, and Nox tries to catch his breath with his arms on the floor. Gioma puts his blade back in its hilt as the announcer declares him the winner of the match. Gioma isn't shocked that the crowd can't even bring themselves to cheer. He showed incredible power out of nowhere, all with a knife that was made for gutting fish. Despite the strength that he has, he still feels that cutting a person is just way too unpleasant. The only consolation they have is that both the Mao brothers and Nox were in the subspace when they fought, so he wasn't really killing people. Nox still tries to catch his breath on the ground, and Gioma can't help but admire the man. He's just as strong as Chloe described, and he has an incredible battle sense that has been honed through experience. However, anyone would be able to sense his intentions through his killing intent. The announcer repeats that Kang Gioma won the duel, and it looks like this is enough to snap everyone out of their daze, and the arena is filled with cheering and shock that a first-year special admission student took down a sophomore. Gioma's peaceful, unassuming life is officially over. But this is the path he chose. Now that things have come to this, he just has to endure it with sheer will and grit. Even by the next day, people are still talking about the duel between the first and second year. In the Star class, Abel stares out the window as she thinks about the student that has completely filled her mind recently. Because of the duel, his name follows her everywhere she goes now, and it's almost as if he's the only one everyone is talking about. When she saw it, she couldn't believe it either. But at that moment, he had such incredible swordsmanship, while only using 2 kitchen knives. Watching his mastery of the blade has made her feel almost hopelessly naive for thinking that she was skilled at using a sword. In fact, he was so good that she's sure that he was the top student her grandfather was keeping as a secret from her. That makes her even more frustrated since she talked to him as if he was weak when he was actually stronger than her. Her loud annoyance is enough to wake up her seat partner, Rachel. She apologizes to her friend, but Rachel can immediately tell that something is seriously bothering Abel. The blue-haired girl tries to play it off by saying that she's frustrated because she hasn't been able to work out recently, but Rachel can immediately see through all of that. She tries some guesses to see what might be bothering Abel, and hits the nail on the head when she mentions that it might be boy trouble. Rachel breaks out in uninhibited laughter at the thought that Lady Abel would be interested in romance. All the while, Abel tries to convince her friend that it really isn't what she thinks it is. Rachel ignores her and shifts her focus to figuring out what man has gotten her dear friend so flustered. She runs through the list of options, starting with Leon, the class star with a handsome face. But Abel is so deadpan at the mention of that idea that it's obviously not him. Then that leaves only one option: the special student from the duel yesterday that shocked the entire school with his strength. Again, Abel freezes and isn't able to outright deny it, which is all the information that Rachel needs. Immediately, she grabs Rachel's hand and drags her to the Tiger class to meet the boy that has been on everyone's mind. The two of them barge into Tiger class with Abel, reluctantly following along with her friend. Everyone in the class freezes in shock as the two school beauties make their way through the class. Rachel stands on a target, but someone tries to come and scold her for suddenly leaping on another student's seat. She's able to completely confuse him by showing off how pretty she is, and Abel can only hold her head in embarrassment at her friend's actions. Eventually, she finds Gioma sleeping on his desk while Chloe fawns over him. Rachel at first mistakes Chloe for his girlfriend, but that doesn't matter to her, and it only makes this whole thing more fun. She walks up to Gioma and blows air lovingly into his ear, which shocks both Abel and Chloe. Then, as he slowly wakes up, she sits down on his desk with a flirty look on her face and asks him for his name. Gioma already knows who she is though, and he's not excited to see another one of the game's heroines in front of him all of a sudden. She leans her finger closer and pokes Gioma on the face, complimenting his looks, while he just stares at her, shocked. He has no idea what's going on, but his intuition is screaming at him that this entire situation is dangerous. Suddenly, the hand that Rachel was about to use to poke Gioma is grabbed by a very angry-looking Chloe. Chloe demands to know what Rachel thinks she's doing, but her anger and murderous intent only amuse Rachel. It looks like Gioma's danger instincts were warning him about Chloe. Her personality has completely flipped as she spawns a box cutter from the Yonder Pocket dimension. If a knife fight breaks out in the classroom, it could spark some serious problems for him down the line. This is a combination he has never seen in the game before, and he can only wonder why this is happening all of a sudden. Abel comes in and tries to drag her friend out of the situation, especially since this isn't even their classroom. But Rachel won't budge. She claims that she's only here to say hello, and then, as if to pour salt in the wound, she places a hand on Chloe's head and tells her that she's not supposed to interrupt when adults are talking. That only makes Chloe even more angry, and she opens up the box cutter and prepares to strike. Gioma and Abel watch in shock as Chloe tries to stab Rachel, but her hand is easily grabbed by the much stronger girl. At this point, she's just pointlessly provoking Chloe into a fight, and Abel yells at her once again to stop what she's doing before something bad happens. Rachel frowns and quickly tosses Chloe away like paper, but Chloe is able to catch herself before falling, causing all the boys in class to scream out in joy at the building catfight. Gioma is more annoyed than anything at the weird build-up happening in front of him. Then Rachel activates her blessing that's built from the foundation of her clan, the clan of the Spear Saint. In her clan, they believe that skills are useless when faced with overwhelming strength, and they believe that brute force triumphs over all else. That's the same motto that Rachel Demora, the niece of the Spear Saint, believes in as well. She bluntly asks Gioma if Chloe is her girlfriend, and our MC doesn't hesitate in saying no, and that causes Chloe's aggression to momentarily turn to him. He clarifies that she's just a friend, and Rachel seems to get even more interested in the whole ordeal. Meanwhile, Gioma is still trying to figure out just what in the world this whole situation is about. Now that he's more awake and has a chance to look around, he finally notices Abel, who looks just as frazzled as he was not too long ago. He cuts straight to the point and asks why the two of them came looking for him, and Rachel says it's because Abel was interested in him and wanted to see his face. Abel yells that her accusations are definitely not true, and it's Rachel that practically dragged her there. Rachel thought that Abel genuinely wanted to see him because she followed her to the Tiger class. As the entire class's attention turns to her, she tries to shyly explain that there was a misunderstanding, but now Gioma just wants them to leave. He tells that to them bluntly, and that shocks the two girls, and Rachel can barely hold back her laughter. That makes her even more interested in Gioma, and she likes interesting guys. She tries inviting him over to her dorm room after class to do some ungodly things together, and that's the last straw for Chloe. She yells for Rachel to get away from her Gioma right this moment, and Rachel tries to mock her again, but Abel has had enough. Even she can barely hold back her anger at Rachel's flirting. Sensing that things might be getting too far, Rachel finally backs off, but not before telling Gioma that she'll see him later, which he quickly refuses and tells her not to come back. The two girls finally leave the class, and Gioma immediately goes back to sleep, while Chloe rushes to check up on him. No one notices Abel pausing for a moment to stare longingly at Gioma before walking away. Abel and Rachel continue their walk back to their class, and Rachel can't get over just how impressed she was by Gioma's attitude. It's one thing to be cold, but from his hollow eyes, Rachel could faintly tell that there was an underlying subtle feeling that she could get her throat cut if she continued poking him like that. She was just curious about him, but he went far beyond her expectations and actually gave her chills. From the little she could see, she can already tell that he's easily a step above all the style with no substance students that are all over the star class. Her clan pulls no punches when it comes to getting betrothed to the most outstanding warriors, and in a way, he just might be a precious resource that she wouldn't want to let go of. Rachel turns around suddenly and apologizes to Abel. Abel, on the other hand, feels like she should apologize to the students of Tiger class for the scene she made, but that's not what Rachel meant. She's apologizing about Kang Jeoma because going forward, she's not going to yield now that she's interested in him. Elsewhere in the school's clinic, Nox pulls himself angrily through the halls with only the thought of killing Gamma in his mind. He has lived his entire life without knowing defeat, constantly being called the auditor genius. Now someone has come and defeated him with nothing but kitchen knives. Just the thought of Jeoma's face pisses him off to an outstanding degree. If he has to, he will call the power of his entire clan just to cut off Jeoma's head, and then once he kills RMC, he will get Chloe back. Chloe has the potential to become similar, if not greater than him, and he won't let some random special admissions nobody take her away from him. All he has to do is call on the power of his clan to strike, and then they will show him. At least that's what should have happened. But the same Jeoma that he has been relentlessly plotting to kill sits calmly in his clinic room, eating an apple. Before then though, while the class was in session, Jeoma watched Chloe worriedly. The two girls have left, but Chloe is very clearly still upset, even though she was the one who pulled the blade out first. As she's having her psychotic thoughts, Jeoma goes over to her in hopes of calming her down. Even though he can probably talk her out of whatever mental break she's about to have, he still wished she'd at least put the box cutter down when talking to him. He asks her about how Nox is doing, and she sadly tells him that her brother is in the academy's medical ward. That's odd though, since people can't actually get injured in the subspace, so he shouldn't have any need for medical attention. The last Chloe heard, he was admitted into the ward despite having no injuries. But it should be fine, and there shouldn't be any reason for Jeoma to worry. Jeoma can't help but think about it though. Even though he was sliced up in the subspace, Nox isn't the kind of person that would be weak enough to be traumatized from that. To make sure that nothing else happens, he has to check in on Nox. And to do that, he asks Chloe to tell him where Nox's room is. To sweeten the deal, he even pats her head, which is another tip he got from the How to Handle Yandere type series. That's how we got to where we are today. As Jeoma stares down Nox, who is still surprised to see our MC in his room, Jeoma comments on the room and how the auditors must be loaded with cash for them to get a hospital room this fancy for just one person. Before Nox can ask Jeoma how he got into this room in the first place, our MC picks up a skinning knife from the bedside counter, and Nox momentarily goes on guard, wondering if Jeoma wants to finish what he started. However, instead, Jeoma simply picks up another apple and cleanly peels the skin off before placing it right back on the table. Then, Jeoma gets up and walks right past Nox, advising him to take fruits and vegetables for his health. That pisses Nox off even more, and the assassin reveals a knife hidden under his sleeve, ready to stab Jeoma while he's least expecting it. But, as if predicting this, Jeoma warns him that if he ever has ideas of getting any sort of revenge, then he will be cut up along with the entirety of Auditore. With that, Jeoma slams the door shut as he leaves, and the force is harsh enough to turn the apple that he cleanly peeled into slices, revealing that he cut it up so fast that Nox didn't even notice. Jeoma walks out of the medical unit with his mission hopefully accomplished. Now Nox is nothing more than a candle that can be extinguished at any time, and his will has been totally destroyed. This is all thanks to Jeoma's bravado-filled intimidation, which he hopes doesn't come back to bite him. After all, the Auditores are an incredible group of assassins, and there's no way that he can take on an entire clan with just 30 seconds of pain neutralizer. Although he should be able to take out 10 people in 30 seconds, the rest of the clan is an entirely different case, and that's only in the worst case scenario. Anyways, Jeoma would love to avoid killing as much as he can. As he walks under the moonlight back to his dorm room, he feels like he's standing in the eye of a storm in a weird way. He's starting to get used to this new crazy life of his. As long as Nox doesn't stir up any trouble, then he doesn't have to worry about things getting too insane. But he has another problem to deal with, and that's the girl that he wanted to avoid the most, Rachel Demura. In the original game, Rachel was the one who approached the main character first and eventually grew close to the main heroine, Abel. But now that she had chosen to approach him instead, it clearly meant the timeline had changed in a major way. On top of that, he also had to prepare for the midterms, and this time he actually needed to take things seriously if he wanted to earn the reward. The test required a group of 5 students who would work together to subdue a demonic monster. These 5 students would be selected regardless of their class, as the whole purpose of the test was to emphasize teamwork. While individual strength was important, trusting and relying on teammates mattered even more on the battlefield. In a situation like this, the smartest move for a weaker student was to find strong teammates and hope to be carried through. Still, it wasn't like the monsters themselves were a huge threat. The ones assigned for this test were D-rank demonic monster mermen. Jeoma remembered how disgustingly ugly they looked in the game, which meant facing them in real life would be even worse. If they were mermaids, At least they would have been somewhat pleasant to look at, but mermen were simply revolting. On the other hand, mermaids were classified as demonic humans and served as the main force of the demon army, making them far more powerful. Compared to demonic humans, demonic monsters were basically nothing more than guard dogs or pets. Thankfully, only mermen were expected to appear on the island, so the students wouldn't have to deal with demonic humans. It had already been a month since Gioma arrived at the academy, and this was the first night he had felt even a little at peace. 700 years had passed since humans and demons agreed to a truce. Still, just like human history itself, that peace had never been completely free of conflict, with both major and minor disputes occurring over time. One notable example was half a century ago, when Vasmon, the commander of the 6th Legion, declared he would revive the commander of the 1st Legion. That single decision led to a week-long battle that drenched an entire city in blood. In the end, humanity came out victorious, giving rise to the 7 heroes. However, 3 of those heroes were lost, and after that, neither side wanted to push the conflict any further. Since then, peace had continued. Even so, Gioma couldn't help but question whether this was truly peace. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it seemed that someone had managed to seal the 1st Legion commander alone 700 years ago, which meant that person must have been an absolute monster. In contrast, it had taken 7 people to defeat the 6th Legion commander, and even then, lives were lost. And now, with only 3 years left before the second human-demon war begins, the situation felt even heavier. This time, the Demon King himself would be involved. The thought of that future was terrifying, but worrying about it wouldn't change anything. Right now, Gioma needed to focus on the upcoming midterms. His first task was to form a team, but that was easier said than done since he didn't have any friends. However, he was currently the most famous student in the academy, and he figured he could use that to his advantage to solve this problem. There was no way he could stay unnoticed for the next 3 years anyway. Because of that, Gioma decided to change his approach. He would stop trying to live quietly and instead aim to live comfortably, while making the most of his situation. With that in mind, he prepared himself to do everything he could to gather people and form his group. A week passed, yet nothing changed, and he still found himself completely alone without a single person inviting him into their group. In the end, it seemed like everyone was simply too scared of him. When he turned to look around the class, the only other person sitting alone just like him was Chloe. Maybe she had been pushed aside after the incident with her brother and his defeat, or maybe it was because of how she reacted when Rachel showed up. Whatever the reason, he walked up to her and asked if she still hadn't found anyone to team up with. Just like him, she was still alone, and that honestly made him worry a bit. He was already used to being by himself, but she at least used to have friends, and now they were all gone. Still, she calmly said she would be fine as long as she had him. Taking that as enough, he offered to team up with her so they could find 3 more members together. With Chloe's abilities, she was basically a massive advantage, since he could only fight for 30 seconds, while she was like having 30 soldiers packed into one small, cute figure. That brief moment of peace shattered when Rachel suddenly burst into the classroom calling out for Gioma. He didn't even try to hide the annoyance on his face at seeing her again, and Chloe didn't hide her bloodlust either, already pulling out a box cutter like she was ready to go wild. Rachel, completely ignoring the tension, kept bothering him, and even leaned over his desk before asking if he had found a group yet. Since she clearly wasn't paying attention to anything else, he just answered her honestly, and hearing that he didn't have a group worked perfectly in her favor as she immediately invited him to join hers. The offer felt suspicious right away, because someone like her would obviously have plenty of strong students lining up to join, so there was no reason for her to specifically come to him. But she casually explained that he just seemed more fun to team up with than anyone else in her class. He told her he had already teamed up with Chloe, but that didn't bother her either, since her group still had 2 empty spots. Even then, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this was risky for her, since teaming up like this could affect her grades if things went wrong during the island test. He looked over at Chloe, and after a moment, she reluctantly nodded, agreeing to join. With nothing stopping him anymore, he accepted the offer, and Rachel instantly pulled out her phone to text someone while warning him that he couldn't back out now. Curious, he asked about the rest of the group members, and the moment she mentioned Leon, his mood dropped instantly. Not just any Leon, protagonist of this world. The one person he least wanted to get involved with. At that point, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of sins he must have committed in his past life to end up with such terrible luck. Sure, he had spent 30 years handling a knife, but that was just part of his job. Somehow, despite trying to stay low-key, he kept getting dragged into situations with the heroines, and even worse, into the main storyline itself. Being around the heroines wasn't exactly a bad thing since they were easy on the eyes, but Leon Van Reinhardt was a completely different problem. As the main character, interacting with him could twist the entire plot in unpredictable ways. Right now, Gioma had no idea how things would unfold, but he was already convinced that somehow it would all end up being his fault. He even thought about trying to switch groups, but Rachel had already submitted his name in the application before even asking him properly. For the first time in his life, he seriously felt like cutting someone down, and unfortunately, that someone was a girl. On top of that, there was still the biggest headache of all, the yandere sitting right beside him. Almost as if on cue, Chloe appeared next to him, asking what was wrong since he had been looking completely frozen ever since Rachel left. He brushed it off, saying he was just overwhelmed at the idea of taking the exam with Star Class cadets. Chloe immediately reassured him, saying no one in Star Class was stronger than him, and he could only respond with a weak thank you. After all, he had chosen to team up with Chloe himself, so there was no way he could take the exam without her now. Thinking about it more calmly, this group might actually be the best option available to him. It could even turn out to be something good, if only he wasn't being so negative about everything. He then asked Chloe about the time and place for their first group meeting, and she told him it would be held at a cafe on campus. Since it was almost time, he suggested they head there right away. They arrived first and ordered drinks, with Chloe happily getting herself an avocado smoothie, while he could only watch in envy, thinking about how expensive even one cup must be. Meanwhile, he settled for a cheap espresso, but the moment he took a sip, it tasted so awful, it almost felt like his body was rejecting it. Since the cafe was run by an outside company, faculty cards didn't work there, meaning he had to spend his own money for the first time. While silently regretting his life choices, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel saying she was bringing the others. Not long after, she walked in with Leon and another guy following behind. That was the moment Gioma and Leon made their first real contact. As Gioma glanced at the other guy, his first impression was that the guy looked like some kind of delinquent. Leon was the first to step forward and introduce himself, extending his hand confidently. Gioma accepted the handshake, and Leon immediately complimented him on his performance in the subspace battle a few days ago. Just from the way he spoke, Gioma could tell he carried both intelligence and elegance naturally. After that, everyone sat down, and Rachel suggested they all introduce themselves properly. Leon went first, presenting himself as the leader of the group and a Star Class student. Somehow, he had already taken the position of leader, and he genuinely seemed eager to work together with everyone. Rachel went next, but since everyone already knew her, she quickly passed the turn to the guy beside her. He introduced himself as Speed Weapon, also a Star Class student, keeping it short and direct, though Gioma couldn't help but focus more on how strange his name sounded. Then Chloe introduced herself as a Wolf Class student who joined the group thanks to Gioma, but Rachel teased her for calling him Gioma-kun, which led to a brief tense stare between them before Chloe calmed herself down with a sigh and finished speaking. Finally, Gioma gave his own introduction, which was even shorter than Speed Weapon's, simply stating his name and class without adding anything else. Leon pulled out a laptop to officially begin the meeting, pressing a button that projected a holographic map of the exam area. The location was called Scapoli Island, and they would be transported there through a subspace gate to a specific point on the island. However, only the entry would involve subspace, meaning once they arrived, everything would be completely real and they could actually get injured by the demonic beasts. Their assigned zone was the northeastern coast, where 3 different groups, including theirs, would be hunting mermen. Since the number of mermen in the area was limited, the goal of the exam was simple: hunt as many as possible within that limit. After explaining everything, Leon wrapped up the presentation and asked if anyone had questions. Speed Weapon spoke first, asking if there were any dangers on the island besides the mermen. Leon explained that the instructors had already thoroughly checked the area beforehand, ensuring that no other monsters or demons would be present. Then Chloe asked whether groups could ambush or fight each other, which visibly shocked everyone else at the table. Leon calmly clarified that the exam was strictly about eliminating demonic beasts, and any conflict between groups would result in immediate disqualification. It was obvious that Chloe's question came from her assassin instincts. With no further questions, Leon ended the meeting and told everyone to focus on preparing for the midterms, adding that they would meet again the next day for another discussion. One by one, the others left the cafe, leaving only Gioma and Leon behind. The silence between them felt awkward, and Gioma quickly tried to leave, but Leon suddenly called out to him and asked where he came from. The question caught Gioma off guard, making him pause as he tried to process it. He had heard something similar before, but coming from Leon, it felt completely different. Leon looked unusually serious while asking, and Gioma couldn't read his intentions at all. What made it even stranger was that Leon had waited until everyone else had left before asking. After a long silence, Leon apologized for bringing up such a question out of nowhere, and admitted that he couldn't shake the feeling that Gioma was similar to him. Even though the world's official language was Korean, because of the game's origin, that didn't mean other cultures didn't exist, and anyone could tell just by looking that Gioma was Korean. So Leon asking where he came from and claiming similarity only made things more confusing. Gioma stayed silent, struggling to make sense of the situation, and eventually Leon told him to forget the question entirely before standing up to leave, but Gioma stopped him and reflexively threw the same question back, asking where Leon came from. He regretted it instantly, but at the same time, he knew he wouldn't be able to rest without hearing the answer. Leon calmly took his hand and simply said he was from Germany before leaving without another word. Left alone, Gioma couldn't stop wondering what had just happened. When Leon first asked that question, it made him consider the possibility that the main character of the game might also be someone from another world. It sounded crazy, but it was still a real possibility. After all, There was no rule saying only one person could be transported into the game, and taking over the main character's role was far more likely than ending up as a side character. His gaze drifted toward the knife on the table, and an idea struck him. Whenever the blessing of the sword god activated, his senses became unusually sharp. Maybe triggering it would give him some kind of answer. He picked up the knife, removed its cover, and just as he hoped, a message formed in his mind, confirming that Leon truly belonged to this world. The voice he heard felt similar to the one he experienced when fighting Chloe while activating the blessing. However, just thinking too deeply about it caused a migraine that even bypassed his painless blessing. Still, one thing was certain: the Leon he had just met was exactly the same Leon from the game, something no actor could replicate so perfectly. Even so, Leon's sudden question about his origin and the claim that they were similar kept bothering him. To look for answers, he checked a wiki page, but there was no information about Leon in this world at all. Everything was starting to feel off, and Gioma decided that this would be the last time he involved himself with Leon. If something like this happened again, he would just go to Medea for help, ignoring whatever attempts she made to drag him along. At the same time, he found it surprising how calm he had remained despite everything happening around him. Maybe his blessings were influencing him more than he realized. He opened his status screen, and as usual, things seemed to be progressing steadily. His mental fortitude and armament remained unchanged, but his physical fortitude had increased thanks to his training. His armament would likely improve as well once he obtained Murasame from the midterm exam. The only thing he couldn't figure out was his assimilation rate. It had increased significantly and seemed close to unlocking something new, possibly connected to everything he had done so far. Not knowing what it was still annoyed him, especially since there was no one he could ask about it. However, at the bottom of the status screen, something new caught his attention. His blessing of painlessness had extended by 10 seconds, meaning he could now use it for a total of 40 seconds. After all the effort he had put in, it finally felt like his hard work was paying off. As the days passed and the group continued meeting to plan their strategy for the exam, Gioma kept training, steadily sharpening his abilities. At last, the day of the exam arrived, and all the groups gathered in front of the subspace gate. The moment Gioma looked at it, he could tell this one felt completely different from the training ground subspace. Soon, the rest of his team showed up as well, and they all seemed just as excited as he was. During their earlier meetings, they had already assigned roles to each member. Rachel would take the front as the main damage dealer, while Leon stayed in the center as the leader to coordinate everyone. Speed Weapon would position himself behind Leon as support. Chloe would fight alongside Rachel as a secondary damage dealer, and Gioma would cover the rear, forming a well-balanced team. Taking a moment, Gioma looked over their equipment and couldn't help but feel impressed by how powerful everything was. Rachel was carrying an S-rank weapon known as the Vermilion Phoenix Halberd. Leon, even without bowman, still wielded a strong sword. Then there was Speed Weapon, whose gear turned out to be a recorder, which made Gioma wonder if the support role also included providing background music. Rachel quickly clarified that the recorder was actually one of the rare S-rank armaments capable of healing. Even Gioma knew how absurdly difficult it was to obtain healing-type S-rank equipment, making it incredibly valuable. Curious, he stepped closer to examine it, catching Speed Weapon slightly off guard. Their conversation was interrupted when an announcement came through the speakers, declaring the start of the first-year midterms. Soon after, the Wolf class instructor, Lee Wanbin, approached the students. Since everyone already understood the rules, he kept things short, reminding them not to hesitate to retreat if things became dangerous, as risking their lives for extra credit wasn't worth it. If anyone got injured or wanted to surrender, they could simply call for the assigned instructor. With that, he encouraged them to do their best and not let nerves get the better of them. Noticing Chloe looking uneasy, Gioma asked what was bothering her. She admitted that she was worried about the possibility of mermaids appearing on the island. Gioma reassured her once again that the instructors had already confirmed the area was clear, but even so, she couldn't shake her anxiety. Growing up in Sicily, she had often heard stories about mermaids causing massive destruction. Although humans now had a truce with demonic beings, making such encounters rare outside of dungeons, the fact that these rumors still persisted made her uneasy, especially since the exact conditions for mermaid appearances were still unclear. Seeing her like that, Gioma gently placed a hand on her head to calm her down, just as the instructors called for the cadets to step through the gate. She gave a small smile and chose to trust him. Sometime later, Chloe vaguely heard Gioma's voice calling out to her through a hazy state of mind. It seemed like she had lost focus for a moment, but when she opened her eyes, everything had already taken a turn for the worse. In front of her stood Gioma and the rest of the group, all facing something massive and dangerous. Rachel quickly asked Speed Weapon if he could contact the instructor, but being inside a cave meant there was no signal on his phone. Nearby, someone lay on the ground, badly injured and bleeding, clearly in critical condition, and standing before them, the source of all this chaos, was a mermaid. To understand how they ended up in such a situation, let's go back to see what happened before the group encountered this nightmare. The moment they arrived on Scapuli Island, the first major issue hit them instantly. Motion motion sickness from passing through the gate. Everyone looked affected except Gioma, who casually mentioned that he didn't get motion sickness at all. Not long after recovering, they encountered their first merman. It froze for a second in surprise after spotting them, then quickly ran off. Despite how disgusting they looked, they were much smaller than Gioma had imagined. Leon pointed out that the one they saw was too small to earn them any points, so if they wanted proper targets, they needed to move toward their assigned area where adult mermen would be. Chloe moved ahead to scout, while the rest of the group followed behind at a steady pace. After some time, they reached the designated location, and Chloe returned to report her findings. About 500 meters ahead, there was a cave, and she led the group straight toward it. Even before stepping inside, they could already feel something was off. Dozens of eyes were watching them from within the darkness. Leon quickly estimated that there were around 50 to 60 mermen gathered inside, all surrounding a campfire. Taking down that many would easily secure them first place in the midterms, but it wasn't that simple. Entering the cave would cut off their internet connection, making it nearly impossible to contact an instructor if something went wrong. It was a clear high-risk, high-reward situation, and the final decision rested on Leon. Before arriving on the island, he had carefully assigned roles to every member, so now it was his responsibility to lead them again. Without wasting time, Leon made his call and signaled Rachel to begin the attack. She leaned back slightly and launched a golden spear straight into the cave. It struck the campfire directly, extinguishing it and throwing the mermen into confusion. Before they could react, Rachel had already closed the distance, and in the next instant, several merman heads were sent flying. Right after that, Speed Weapon stepped in, channeling his power to enhance Rachel's abilities, making it even easier for her to cut through the enemies one after another. Watching her in action, Gioma couldn't hold back his amazement at how insanely strong she was. Chloe noticed that reaction immediately, and without hesitation, she drew her katana, activated her blessing, and jumped into the fight as well. She rushed forward, rapidly cutting down mermen, trying to match Rachel's pace as both of them charged toward each other from opposite sides. Neither of them slowed down, even as they got closer and closer, and Gioma started worrying that neither had any intention of stopping. They came within inches of colliding before suddenly turning at the last second to eliminate the final merman rushing toward them. After that, they stepped apart and continued clearing out the remaining enemies, while Gioma let out a quiet sigh of relief, realizing his worries were unnecessary. In the end, with their combined strength, all 60 mermen were wiped out. With the area cleared, Leon suggested they move on to another location to continue the exam. That level of calm decision-making and leadership only reinforced in Gioma's mind that Leon truly was the main character of this world, because no one else could replicate that kind of heroic presence so naturally. However, as Gioma got lost in his thoughts for just a moment, everything suddenly flipped. When he looked back, he saw Leon collapse to the ground, having taken a fatal blow to the stomach. Shock spread across the group as something powerful rose from the pile of dead mermen behind Gioma. It was a demonoid mermaid, exactly the kind of monster Chloe had been worried about from the beginning. Gioma had already felt that things were going too smoothly, and now that uneasy feeling had proven right. The situation instantly turned critical, leaving them with a harsh choice: run or fight. But escaping while carrying an injured Leon might not even be possible. Rachel immediately told Speed Weapon to contact the instructors and report the appearance of the mermaid, but just as Gioma feared, the cave completely blocked their connection, leaving them unable to reach anyone. Panic began to spread among the group, and strangely, Gioma was the only one who remained calm. With Leon out of action, someone had to take control, and Gioma stepped forward to fill that role. He quickly started giving orders, telling Rachel to keep the mermaid occupied no matter what. Then he instructed Speed Weapon to pour as much healing as possible into Leon. Finally, he called out to Chloe, who seemed momentarily frozen, and ordered her to evacuate the other cadets and inform the instructors about what had happened. It took her a second to process everything, but she eventually snapped out of it and moved to carry out his command. With everyone assigned their roles, Gioma stepped forward to face the mermaid himself, shocking the others. He told Rachel and Speed Weapon to handle the remaining mermen, leaving the mermaid to him. After all, dealing with fish like that had always been his specialty. Demons possess a distinct power that is comparable to the blessings used by humans, and that power is called magic. It is strong enough to defeat the protagonist in a single strike, clearly showing the overwhelming difference in strength between demons and humans. Even though Gioma has the blessing of the sword god, that alone does not guarantee that he will survive this fight. In the original game, defeating a demon that uses magic without forming a party was simply impossible, and yet, right now, he is about to face a boss alone that would normally require a full raid team. In simple terms, Gioma is completely screwed, but there is no way for him to back out at this point. Chloe will need about 10 minutes to find help and return, but Gioma only has 40 seconds to take down this oversized fish before he ends up in a worse situation than the main character. At the same time, Rachel continues struggling to keep the mermen away, while Speed Weapon concentrates all of his power on healing Leon. The wound on Leon is deep, yet it is still recovering regardless. Even with such a difficult situation unfolding, Speed Weapon cannot stop focusing on Gioma. Just the sight of the mermaid makes his bones tremble, and yet Gioma is willingly willingly choosing to fight it alone. The demon makes the first move, firing the exact same laser attack that had taken Leon down earlier. Gioma dodges the attack and immediately rushes forward with his knife, closing the distance between them. The mermaid appears to mainly rely on long-range attacks that carry water-based magic properties. Gioma does not know much about magic itself, but what he does know is that this demon still has flesh and bones like any other creature. To win, all he needs to do is get close and cut it down. He leaps toward the demon and swings his blade, but the mermaid dodges the strike and immediately redirects its movement toward Speed Weapon. Before it can reach him, Gioma circles around and manages to slice off one of the creature's fins, making it scream out in pain. However, the cut is far too shallow. Gioma immediately attempts another strike, but the demon quickly avoids it and dissolves into water. Since the mermaid targeted Speed Weapon, it becomes clear that it is deliberately aiming for those who are already injured. At this point, Leon has recovered to some extent, and Speed Weapon calls out to Gioma, showing that he is still conscious. Gioma briefly checks on him before charging back to confront the mermaid again. From Speed Weapon's perspective, Gioma looks incredibly cool. During one of their earlier meetings, Speed Weapon had mentioned how much he admired heroes who would sacrifice themselves for others. Ever since he joined the academy, he had not seen anyone who truly lived up to that image. That is why he joined Rachel's group in hopes of finding such a hero in Leon. He had even openly told Gioma that he did not see him as a hero at all. And yet now, in this chaotic and dangerous situation, the one stepping forward and risking his life is Gioma himself. The mermaid continues its assault, launching fish-shaped magical attacks that Gioma skillfully dodges. However, this time, instead of simply passing by him, the attacks turn around and begin chasing him. The demon is able to control these projectiles, forcing Gioma to keep moving as they pursue him around the cave. While Gioma is occupied with evading them, the mermaid once again attempts to attack Speed Weapon. Gioma arrives just in time and strikes the demon before it can release the attack, but once again, the cut is too shallow. It becomes obvious that small wounds will not be enough to defeat it. If he wants to kill the demon for good, he will need to drive his blade in as deeply as possible. The mermaid fires another blast toward Gioma, but this time he dodges in such a way that the attack crashes through the ceiling of the cave and shoots up into the sky. The force of the attack is so immense that cadets around the mountain can see it, and they also hear a loud roar echoing afterward. On top of that, rain begins to fall. An instructor with another group suggests that they quickly move the injured before the rain starts to affect them further. Back inside the cave, the mermen begin retreating, giving the cadets a brief moment to catch their breath. The mermaid has been crushed under the debris caused by the cave breaking apart, but Gioma is certain that it is not dead. Just as he expects, the demon mermaid bursts through the pile of rocks and rushes toward the students once again. Up until now, Gioma has not been able to fight properly because he has been constantly mindful of the injured Leon. Now that the mermen have retreated, he tells Rachel to take care of both Speed Weapon and Leon for him. Even at this point, Speed Weapon still cannot believe that Gioma is choosing to fight a demon alone. Earlier, he thought Gioma was simply reckless, but now it feels like he is witnessing the rise of something far greater. Meanwhile, Gioma feels relieved that he can finally focus completely now that he no longer has to worry about his teammates. He only has 10 seconds left on his painless blessing, and he needs to make up for the time he has already lost if he wants to survive. For a brief moment, Gioma and the mermaid lock eyes, and then both of them rush forward at the same time, heading straight into their final clash. Elsewhere, Chloe dashes through the forest as fast as she can, looking for anyone to help her. She's tired, but she knows she can't stop running unless everyone she left behind will be in danger. Her body hurts incredibly bad, but the more she feels like stopping, the more she thinks about Gioma and the fact that he's in the cave fighting that monster on his own for their sake. Gioma really is the strongest person she has ever met in her life. He clearly doesn't like fighting and tries to avoid drawing his blade whenever possible. The only time he stands to fight is when there is really no other choice. Since Gioma made the best decision fighting that mermaid, she knows she has to do her best to get help, but she can't help feeling that if she was just a little stronger, then maybe she would have been able to help him somehow. Behind her, a loud blast tears the side of the cave apart, and she knows that it's the sound of Gioma and the mermaid fighting. In her worry, she trips off a vine and almost falls, but manages to catch herself on the ground and keeps running. She can't stop or fall until she has found someone to help. As she continues to run, she senses something ahead of her. She can't send it clearly since her head is in a mess, but her first thought is that they must be mermen. She draws her sword to defend herself and unleashes a blow towards the closest one to her, but surprisingly, the merman blocks with their sword. That's because it isn't a merman, it's Abel. As soon as she realizes that she has finally found another person, Chloe stops moving and collapses to the ground. Abel's teammates get suspicious and start to suspect that there is some sort of ambush in the area. Meanwhile, Chloe weakly tries to tell them that they should go and help Gioma. Luckily for her, Abel remembers her face from when she and Rachel went to Gioma's class. Back in the cave, Speed Weapon is left in complete awe at what he's witnessing. He wonders if there will ever be a day as astonishing as this ever again. The way Gioma fights seems like a skilled swordsman handling a live fish on a chopping board with skill. At this point, this whole thing is beyond just fighting a demonoid. Gioma is completely overwhelming it. This scene unfolding right is definitely something that will be etched in his memory for the rest of his life. Even Rachel, who's the successful successor of the Spear clan and grew up among strong people, clearly hasn't seen this caliber of skill before. Despite that, she's the first to push him out of the way when a stray attack comes towards them. Speed Weapon nearly forgot where he was because of how intense the sight was. Gyoma's opponent is a demon that uses magic. A blade against magic isn't a good matchup to begin with, even if our MC has the upper hand right now. If the demon uses magic that can't be countered, then Gyoma will be in danger. As soon as Speed Weapon has that thought, as if on K, the mermaid raises its hands in the air and calls a different magic attack called Needle Squall. The rain around them starts to crystallize and freeze, and everything halts for a moment. Then the mermaid drops its hand, and all the sharp crystallized raindrops fall towards Gyoma. He dodges some and parries the rest, but they are too hard for his knife. The blade starts to break apart as he fights with it. Instead of keeping the blade aside, Gyoma tosses it at the mermaid. It cuts straight through the mermaid's side, leaving a gaping hole in its waist. Gyoma then follows up with a final attack, cutting through the mermaid's flesh with one powerful slash. Except the mermaid managed to dodge, and instead used the body of a merman to distract Gyoma. Then it charges up a massive attack right in front of our MC. This one is way too close, and there is no possible way he can dodge it. Just before the attack hits and he starts to panic, his mind is suddenly teleported to a clear space. In that space, he sees a red line that indicates where he should cut, and he hears a voice telling him that if he can slice it, it will cut. Instead of dodging the attack, Gyoma readjusts his grip on the knife and cuts through the magic instead. The cut causes a massive shockwave to push through the area, and by the time the smoke clears, Gyoma stands over the lifeless body of the mermaid. The demon makes a few sounds in death, and Gyoma kicks it away down into the pool that it came out from. Rachel and Speed Weapon stare at the scene in front of them in shock. Somehow, a freshman defeated a demonoid alone. Suddenly, Gyoma falls to his knees and starts coughing up blood. Rachel is the first to react, and she rushes over to him while Speed Weapon checks on Leon. Thankfully, the protagonist is fine, but there are other sounds behind them, and Speed Weapon turns around thinking that the mermen that ran away have returned. Instead, it's Abel and her team carrying an unconscious and injured Chloe. The first thing Abel notices is Rachel, who caresses an unconscious Gyoma. The sight makes her angry for some reason, but she ignores it to look around. The rest of the team look like they all have one foot in the grave, and yet Leon seems completely fine. She informs them that she has contacted the academy, and they will be arriving in an hour to aid them. Now that help is on the way, she wants to know just what exactly happened. She asks Speed Weapon to explain, but he's more frustrated by the academy and the instructors who claimed that they thoroughly checked the island. He doesn't believe that they will believe him anyways, but he starts to tell them what he witnessed. Speed Weapon gives Abel a basic rundown of what happened, and how Gyoma defeated the mermaid alone. Just like Speed Weapon predicted, she can barely believe it. The tales that her grandfather told her when she was younger were more realistic than this. And yet, as ridiculous as the story is, the evidence around them proves that it's the truth. Why would they lie about this anyways? And yet Abel still can't accept it. She's a descendant of the acclaimed hero Balor Joaquin and his disciple Aaron Nibulon. Those are the roots that she has in her, and it has given her a special attribute since birth. Her bloodline has always been filled with promise and potential, and she put in incredible effort to make sure that she wouldn't be overshadowed by her roots. And yet, even with everything going in her favor, and with how far she has managed to get, Kang Gyoma continues to prove that there is a ridiculously large gap between their skills. Abel can't help feeling a mix of fear, dread, and admiration. She tells the healer in her group to try to heal Gyoma while they wait for the teachers. After getting a better look at him, she can see that he's tattered and at death's door. And yet, he fought a demonoid alone and came out victorious. Abel can't help but look at him in envy. Speed Weapon snaps her out of it and tells her that it probably would be best if they don't tell the instructors what happened here in detail. The academy claims that they scouted the island beforehand, and yet a demonoid popped out of a cave that would be easily noticeable by cadets. There's some things that just don't add up in this whole story. Leon tries to cut straight to the point and asks Speed Weapon if he thinks that there is someone among the demon factions within the academy. Leon tries to backtrack since that's not exactly what he meant, but they also can't completely rule out that possibility. It's undeniable that this cave isn't easy for cadets to miss, and as Speed Weapon said, if it weren't for Gyoma, then Leon's group would have been torn to shreds. There were definitely conflicts, both large and small, during the 700-year truce. But there was never a moment where the demons dared to touch the cadets of the academy. There was also a clause in the truce, stating that if an act like that were to happen, then it would be justification for war. Speed Weapon tries to pull them out of their thoughts and assures them that they are definitely blowing things out of proportion. It's not a bad thing to be wary of a possible spy in the academy, but it's way too soon to jump to conclusions. For now, they need to make sure that their stories match up. If there really is a spy in the academy, then Gyoma will definitely become a target once word gets around that that he defeated a demonoid alone. Abel doesn't really agree with keeping things under wraps like this, but since Gioma has worked so hard for their sake and the group seems to unanimously agree with this decision, she suggests that they talk to her grandfather first. After everything, the cadets returned to the academy, and Gioma was taken straight to the hospital. When he finally woke up, the bright evening sunlight was shining directly onto his face, and for a moment, he was genuinely surprised that he was still alive. The last thing he could clearly remember was the mermaid firing a magic sphere right before it died. It wasn't the kind of attack he could dodge, but he had barely managed to perceive it in time. Using his sashimi knife, he cut along a line, splitting the magic cleanly into two halves before it burst apart. Thinking back on it now, he was certain that the magic sphere had been composed of water. On top of that, when he activated the blessing of the sword god during that moment, he felt something unusual, something he couldn't properly put into words. To confirm things, he called up his blessing again, and the status screen appeared in front of him. His mental fortitude had increased by 1, which likely explained why he hadn't felt fear when facing the mermaid. At the same time, it seemed that his assimilation rate had risen enough to unlock a mysterious new attribute. The next attribute would unlock once his assimilation rate reached 15%. He started to wonder if this strange, newly unlocked feature was what had allowed him to see that red line on the mermaid, the one he had cut through. While he was still thinking about all of this, the door suddenly opened, and a familiar figure rushed inside. It was Medea, and without hesitation, she threw herself at him, wrapping him in a tight hug. She immediately began fussing over him, while Gioma struggled just to breathe under what felt like a suffocating embrace. After a while, she finally let go and apologized, but then quickly revealed the reason she had come. Reaching into her purse, she opened a dimensional pocket and pulled something out. It was the exact reward he had been hoping to receive from the exam, the Murasame sword. The Murasame was a B-rank weapon with high-level stats, exactly what Gioma had been aiming for. He stared at it in disbelief as Medea asked if he liked it, then apologized for giving it to him like this instead of letting him receive it officially. At the same time, someone was quietly standing at the door, watching everything. Medea noticed and called out to them, telling them to stop lurking and come inside instead of acting like a shy creep. Siegfried cleared his throat awkwardly before stepping into the room and standing beside Medea. Seeing this scene gave Gioma a strange sense of déjà vu, reminding him of what had happened when he first arrived at the academy. He then asked why the Sword Emperor was here as well. Medea explained that she had heard everything from his teammates. After that, both of them lowered their heads and apologized on behalf of the entire academy. They admitted responsibility for what had happened during the midterms, acknowledging that due to their negligence, everyone involved had nearly lost their lives. Gioma found himself unable to respond as Medea continued speaking, promising that they would uncover the truth behind the incident. Siegfried also spoke up, thanking Gioma for saving the cadets. Gioma scratched his cheek awkwardly and quietly replied that he had only done what he could. Medea then added that although his actions had been exceptional, they needed to keep the entire incident a secret. She believed that the person behind it was somewhere within the academy, and if they didn't stay quiet, the situation could leak to the public. Gioma understood their reasoning and didn't hold it against them. Hearing that, Medea smiled and commented that sometimes he behaved like an old man trapped inside a teenage boy's body. Not long after, the two administrators stepped out of the room and headed back toward the administrative block. As they walked through the corridors, Medea turned to her old friend and asked if he still remembered the day they first met after enrolling in the academy. Siegfried acted as if he didn't remember anything at all, and Medea responded with a faint smile. To her, it felt like those moments had happened just yesterday, yet in reality, 60 years had already passed since then. Even so, that span of time didn't even make up a tenth of Joaquin Academy's long history. When they had first enrolled, the academy was already ancient, overflowing with a deep and rich past. Over the centuries, there had been both major and minor incidents, but for 700 years, the academy had continued to nurture and protect its cadets. All of a sudden, the mood shifted, and Medea's aura flared out, causing the nearby windows to crack and shatter. Before the midterms began, she had received reports confirming that multiple preliminary surveys of the island had been completed. Although it was rare, Scopoli Island was known as a place where mermaids had been sighted before. Because of that, she had taken every possible precaution to ensure that nothing would happen to her precious students. And yet, despite all that preparation, something this disastrous had still occurred under her supervision. Siegfried gently placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her down, and she quickly regained control, showing an apologetic expression. Then, almost instantly, her mood flipped as she slipped into an excited fangirl-like state while thinking about Gioma. The fact that he had managed to defeat a mermaid all by himself amazed her, and she eagerly asked Siegfried what he thought about it. Siegfried, however, had witnessed countless examples of natural talent throughout his life. He had seen many individuals praised as the chosen ones of their generation, only for them to eventually lose their way. In families of heroes that were obsessed with honor and glory, the word genius was thrown around far too easily. Even the smallest hint of potential was enough for a child to be labeled a genius simply because of their lineage. Because of that, Siegfried had forbidden the use of that that word, even when it came to describing his own granddaughter, Abel. But when it came to Gioma, whose ability seemed almost beyond comprehension, Siegfried found himself reconsidering that stance. Perhaps the term genius could truly apply to him. If Gioma continued to gain experience and grow, Siegfried couldn't help but wonder just how far he might go. There was even a possibility that Kang Gioma could reach heights that Siegfried himself had only ever dreamed of. Without directly answering Medea's question, Siegfried simply walked past her, though not before advising her to remain at the academy for the time being. Medea smiled and followed after him, and the two continued their casual conversation as they made their way further down the hall. Later on, Gioma was finally discharged from the hospital, and he returned to attending his classes like normal. Just as the headmaster had instructed, the fact that he had taken down a demonoid on Scopuli Island had been completely kept secret. Because of that, Gioma couldn't help but feel that his classmates were able to act so carefree, only because he had been the one to stop the mermaid. After being discharged, the very first thing he did was head to the Academy's forge in order to reshape and enhance Murasame. At the moment, the sword felt no different from a simple metal rod to him, especially considering the blessing of the sword god, which made reforging it absolutely necessary. For that purpose, he went to meet the blacksmith, Volander, and now all he could do was hope that the enhancement process would be successful. While he was still thinking about everything that had happened recently, he suddenly heard Chloe calling his name. When he turned around, he saw her approaching him on crutches, with one of her legs wrapped in a cast. Thanks to the emergency treatment provided by Speed Weapon, the doctor had said she would be able to walk without crutches within a week. Even with her injuries, she looked much better than before. Gioma understood that even though he had been the one to take down the mermaid alone, it was actually because of everyone's combined efforts that they had all managed to survive that situation. Chloe's rescue call, Rachel's work in clearing out the mermen, and Speed Weapon's healing and blessings had all played important roles in that battle. The only one who hadn't contributed much was Leon, and Gioma couldn't help but wonder whether someone with that kind of fighting spirit would really be able to defeat the Demon King. Maybe it was just because Leon had been the first to get injured. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted when their instructor rushed into the classroom and ordered everyone to take their seats and pay attention to a few announcements before the training assembly. Once all the students had settled down, the instructor informed them that there would be a co-instructor joining them. At first, the students were annoyed by this unexpected change, but that reaction immediately disappeared when they saw who it was. Siegfried calmly walked into the classroom, leaving the entire class stunned, while Li Wanbin bowed to him respectfully. Even Gioma couldn't hide his shock at seeing the strongest human personally stepping in to teach their class. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an old man is thrown against a wall before being grabbed by the scruff of his neck and held up the wall. A pink-haired woman slaps the old man across the face, sending him flying to the ground. He apologizes to the woman named Instructor Kim while he struggles to control her breathing. This woman, that is mercilessly beating up this man, is the 5th Demon Corps commander, and she is not pleased at all. She asks him why he didn't cooperate with her when he had the chance, and the man tries to apologize, but that only gets him another smack to the face. It's clear that the purple-haired instructor is tired of apologies. The goal of this whole scheme was to bring Leon back from the exams half dead. He may be a hero candidate, but there's no way he could take out a mermaid alone. But now, because of the old man's incompetence, Leon is now comfortable at the academy. Instructor Kim gives the elder another kick to the face, but immediately regrets it when she sees that she got blood on her shoes. She still can't believe that a full demonoid was taken down by a bunch of first years. But looking at the new students that joined the academy this year, she can't say that she is surprised. The elder speaks up and clarifies that taking on the mermaid was done by just one cadet. Instructor Kim first thinks he's talking about Leon, but he clarifies that it's the academy's top student, Kang Gioma. The Demon Corps commander recognizes the name of the special admissions student, and that tells her everything she needs to know. It looks like there's new prey for her to hunt now. Wolf class once again goes on their daily training, with the exception of Chloe, who is still in a cast and crutches. Gioma can't help being jealous of her getting to rest, and he's forced to run for his life with his fellow students. And to make it worse, there's now an older man breathing down his neck after every lap, and he's surprisingly fast and nimble for his age. Siegfried runs up close to Gioma and urges him to run faster, even thinking that he might still be hurt from the midterms. It's weird for the Sword Emperor himself to be running around with first-year students, much less with a special admissions student. Siegfried is a man that will later inherit the title of Sword Saint and become one of the greatest forces of humanity. Not only that, but during the Second Demon War, he will also become Leon's swordsmanship master, and he's a character whose importance rapidly increases in the latter half of the story. So why is someone who's this important training with Wolf class? The main story has clearly started to go off track, and now it's pretty much falling apart. Come to think of it, Leon never ended up receiving the Sword Saint title, and that ended up being a pretty big issue in his past life. But Leon can inherit the Sword Saint family because he's not part of the Nibelung bloodline, so it doesn't matter. That doesn't make this situation any less uncomfortable for Gioma though, especially especially considering the jealous glares his classmates keep shooting him. With how close Siegfried is to Gioma, it almost looks like they are running together. Siegfried also takes moments to try and educate Gioma, telling him that the foundation of any warrior comes from their physical strength and endurance. No matter how talented or outstanding someone is, it's completely worthless if their body cannot support it. Once he gets Gioma motivated, he runs ahead, expecting his student to keep up with him. After their running laps are done, it's time for field training. For this training, personal weapons are strictly prohibited. Instead, the students will have to use one of the weapons provided by the school and learn to master it. Siegfried dumps a variety of weapons on the ground. The rest of the students are surprised by this sudden condition that their teacher has given them. One of them asks why it wouldn't be better to just use the weapons passed down by their families. That's because the basics are more important than anything else. The more a person relies on high-grade weapons, the more they will start to neglect their training. And it's easy to mistake the power of a weapon for one's own strength. At the end of the day, a master can never blame their equipment. Those words resonate with Gioma specifically, and he nods his head in agreement. With no more room for idle chit-chat, the Sword Emperor tells the student to pick up the weapons and master the basics with them. Cadets who can handle ordinary weapons skillfully also have a high probability of receiving a high score in the class, which will affect their promotion evaluation at the end of the year. That additional bit of information gets the rest of the students excited, and they rush to pick up any weapon they can find. Gioma naturally goes towards the sashimi knife laying unnoticed on the floor. As soon as he picks it up, he notices Siegfried's eyes watching him. The students gather together again after picking up their weapons, and Siegfried tells them that they will spend the day getting accustomed to their new weapons by performing one-on-one training between the cadets without a subspace. To make sure that the students don't go overboard with their training, Siegfried suggests that he gives a demonstration of proper sparring. Li Wonbin prepares himself to spar against the Sword Emperor, but him shivering in fear makes it obvious that he's not prepared for this. In his whole life, this has to be the biggest crisis he has ever faced. However, Siegfried has a different idea in mind. He calls for Gioma to come forward for the spar. Siegfried is also holding one of the novice weapons from the pile of old tools, but in his hands, the piece of junk looks especially sharp. The other students are still jealous and confused by the fact that the Sword Emperor himself is calling Gioma out personally. Gioma comes out, and before they start, he asks Gioma if his bones have healed. Once he gets a positive answer, he tells Gioma to pick up his sword. This is just a sparring match, but Gioma thinks that this is way too much. If he crosses swords with the Sword Emperor, it's clear that this won't end easily. If this gets out of hand, at least one of them will lose a hand. And if they are unlucky, then even a head will roll. Despite those thoughts though, maybe because of the influence of divine power, his instincts are craving for a fight. Gioma tries to de-escalate the situation and says that he's nothing compared to the Sword Emperor, so Siegfried should lower his sword. The rest of his classmates mock him behind his back, making fun of the fact that he's chickening out of a fight. Siegfried also isn't impressed and calls Gioma out for continuing to hide his power and his pride as a swordsman. There's no reason for Gioma to have such extraordinary talent while living as a cowardly person. Pride is a word that Gioma had engraved in his heart ever since he claimed the title of the greatest swordsman in the country. Those characteristics are also the reason why he never put down his sword. The provocation from the Sword Emperor is supposed to test him, and if he falls for the prohibition in this situation, then he will definitely end up regretting it for a long time. Still, he can't ignore his pride as a swordsman and his urge to fight. Li Wonbin notices Gioma's change in demeanor and rushes to stop what's about to happen, but Siegfried stops him. It seems like Gioma has already made up his mind. Gioma pulls out the sashimi knife from its cover and prepares for a fight. The two of them stare each other down for a moment, and even at 70, Siegfried can recognize vividly the enlightenment he gained through the sword. When he was younger, he had memories of a one-armed wandering knight teaching him the way of the sword. The swordsmanship that the knight showed him was undoubtedly at the level of a certain realm, and now, the boy that he has been keeping an eye on since the allocation test, Kang Gioma, might be the person that will lead him to that realm. Gioma takes the initiative and charges as Siegfried, but the swordmaster is ready and greets him with a slash of his sword. Gioma is quick enough to dodge and then turn around for another strike, causing Siegfried to deflect with his sword, and the two clash again. The boldness of Gioma to charge in head-on without avoiding the strike is almost inspiring to Siegfried. As the two of them continue to fight, Siegfried notices that even Gioma's physical capabilities have increased a lot. He can even push the Sword Emperor back so effortlessly. However, his sword isn't light either, and Siegfried is determined not to take this match lightly. Meanwhile, the other students watch the two of them fight, but they can't tell what's going on. From what they can tell, Gioma just got lucky during the matchup in the last subspace sparring with Nox. And yet, even the Sword Emperor seems to care a lot about Gioma, who is just a special admission student. They at least hope that the Sword Emperor will give him a proper lesson that will leave him crying. And yet, after several minutes of watching, the two of them are just standing there, staring at each other. Lee Wanbin knows what's really happening though. They aren't just standing still. They have reached a level that the Wolf class instructor doubted was even possible. Before the spar, he warned Siegfried that if the headmaster found out about this, then things might get out of hand. On top of that, the other cadets could also be affected, but Siegfried assured him that he has no intentions of crossing real swords with Gioma. The older man already knows that our MC has the power to cross into a special place. The place is called the Mental Realm. To enter this place and withstand a battle with Siegfried, Gioma must be on an entirely different level than they even gave him credit for. A duel in the Mental Realm is an intense battle of wits, and Siegfried can tell just from the short time they have crossed swords that Gioma is growing at an impressive rate. If that's the case, the Sword Emperor might have to take things to another level as well. He activates a powerful blessing called the Sword Spirit Protection, and even outside the mental realm, the students can feel the intense pressure coming from the two of them. The blue light coming from Siegfried's sword is definitely some sort of aura. It looks like the battle was so intense that the two of them broke out of the mental realm and returned to reality. Things are starting to get out of hand, and if Lee Wanbin doesn't do something to stop this, then there will definitely be bloodshed. Before he can stop them though, Gioma and Siegfried take off and launch at each other, but a loud cry stops them both in their tracks. Medea arrives before they can cross swords again. An appearance causes the ground beneath her to break apart with her anger. The fight ends, and Siegfried is taken back to Medea's office for a proper scolding. He apologizes, but the headmaster is clearly not taking any weak words from him. She yells at him for going way too crazy and trying to pick a fight with a student after she went through so much trouble to get him a spot as an instructor in the school. In that moment, Siegfried lost his self-control and exerted his aura to the fullest. He would probably have gotten an even greater scolding, but as soon as Medea arrived in situation, he turned around to her and apologized. In over 50 years that they have known each other, Medea has never heard him say sorry, and yet he said that today, not just once, but twice. That's the only reason she's calmly trying to listen to him right now. She directly asks him why he would unleash the sword spirit's blessing on a student. If Medea hadn't arrived when she didn't, things would have gotten deadly. Siegfried tells her that if he hadn't released the blessing, then he wouldn't have been able to gain the upper hand against Gioma. That stops Medea in her tracks. For someone with as much pride as Siegfried to admit that, things must be truly incomprehensible. She knows about the innate talent of Kong Jama, but she also knows better than anyone just how strong Siegfried truly is. Then he reveals that Gioma has already reached the mental realm. Siegfried, for comparison, only managed to master it at the age of nearly 30. The fact that a 17-year-old has done it is more than Medea can believe. Siegfried doesn't know either, but there's no denying what he experienced. All this new information is way too much for Medea to understand, but she remembered what she saw after she stopped the fight and went to check on Gioma. The moment she ran up to him, any semblance of dignity as an educator or one of the 7 stars vanished. In that moment, the only emotion she felt towards Gioma was fear. A fear similar to the feeling she had when she met the 6th Division Commander, Vasmon. She can't figure out why she would have such an eerie feeling towards one of her own students, but it does give more credibility to the crazy thing Siegfried is telling her. She then asks Siegfried directly if he lost, and the normally calm and quiet man becomes irate in a second. He yells that even if Gioma's talent is innate, there's no way that it would compare to his. And on top of that, he even says that he wasn't fully armed at the time, which is the reason why things went the way they did. Medea calls him out for breaking his own rule of blaming his equipment. And can equipment really be an excuse when facing off against a student? The way he's overreacting just makes him look ridiculous. Her words make him so angry that he tries to activate the sword spirit's blessing right there, but a firm slap from Medea pulls him out of it. Elsewhere, Gioma wakes up from a dream in which he relived his fight with Siegfried. Everything in that memory had ended well, but the Sword Emperor himself was quite hot-headed, and if Medea hadn't stepped in at the right time, the situation could have turned seriously dangerous. At the same time, the mental realm itself was an incredibly strange phenomenon to experience. It was something that could only be accessed when a person achieved complete mastery and understanding of their weapon. The mental realm functioned as an active space that could be entered only when certain conditions were fulfilled, and only peak-level masters who had devoted their entire lives to honing a single weapon were capable of reaching it. Because of that, even in the world of Miracle's blessing, fewer than 10 heroes could freely access the mental realm. Even Leon, the protagonist who possessed all the qualities of a hero, needed 3 full years of private training just to step into it for the first time, and that was around the point where Gioma had originally stopped playing the game. And yet, Gioma had managed to enter it almost instantly. He considered that it might be because of his sashimi knife. Including his past life, he had been using that knife for over 20 years. On top of that, every time he activated the sword god's blessing, he would enter a state of concentration that went beyond normal perception. The connection between his current life and his past life began to intertwine, allowing him to break through difficult situations. Based on everything he had experienced so far, avoiding problems only made things worse. Instead of being passively carried along by events, it would be better for him to face what he could handle and solve things step by step. Now that he had gained the ability to control the mental realm freely, he figured he could attempt combat training without relying entirely on the sword god's blessing. With that thought, he got out of bed and slowly drew out his sashimi knife. After focusing for a moment, he re-entered the mental realm. But in the very next instant, the entire realm shattered, and a massive hand reached out from the void toward him. It extended downward, and a single finger touched his shoulder, instantly pulling him out of the trance, while at the same time filling the hand holding the knife with a powerful aura. However, whatever force that was, it proved to be too overwhelming for the weapon, and the sashimi knife couldn't withstand it, breaking apart and disintegrating. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit room, several elders were engaged in a heated argument. The same old man who had previously spoken with the Demon Corps commander was now confronting the other elders of the academy. His main objective was to convince them to investigate Gyoma, suspecting that he might be a candidate for the hero. However, the others disagreed, as it was already widely accepted that Leon was the chosen hero candidate. The old man argued back, saying that Leon was still incomplete and couldn't even properly manifest his blessing, whereas Gyoma had already demonstrated clear ability, starting from when he defeated the Genius Twins during the class placement exam. Furthermore, Medea was deliberately suppressing information about him under the excuse of protecting the student, which only made everything about Gyoma seem even more suspicious. Because of all this, he insisted that an investigation was necessary. He also brought up how the Seven Stars had been interfering too much in their authority, especially after Medea, one of the Seven Stars, became the academy director, which had significantly weakened the elders' influence. After Basman's defeat, public attention had shifted entirely toward the Seven Stars, leaving the elders to be seen as nothing more than outdated figures. If a new hero were to emerge, it would only further diminish their standing. The other elders began to agree, realizing that maintaining their power might require the existence of a public enemy. In the end, they unanimously decided that the hero who could threaten the Demon King must be eliminated. The man pushing this agenda had become an elder because of the purple-haired instructor, which was why he was going to such lengths to persuade the others through sheer force. He knew that if he failed here, Kim, the 5th Division commander of the Demon King's forces, would make him regret it in the worst possible way. After continuing his arguments, the elders finally reached a conclusion. Kang Gyoma needed to be investigated and ultimately eliminated, and to carry out that plan, they would issue orders to the Auditory family. That wasn't the only issue Gyoma had to deal with. Right now, he was staring directly at the blacksmith he had trusted with his weapon, while the man slowly stepped back in fear. Gyoma had originally hoped to use Murasame as an alternative to his sashimi knives, but somehow, Volander had turned his only chance of escaping reliance on the sword god's blessing into another sashimi knife. And as if that alone wasn't bad enough, the weapon had also dropped from a B-rank sword down to an E-rank. Even Volander himself looked completely baffled. In all his 30 years of forging and smelting weapons, he had never encountered something like this before. When he had tried to work on the sword, it felt as if the weapon itself was resisting the forging process. In the end, he had no choice but to quickly melt it down and reforge it, and even then, he barely managed to give it a proper shape. If any ordinary blacksmith had attempted the same thing, they would have ended up with nothing more than a useless lump of metal. Despite everything, even with his 20 years of experience handling knives, Gyoma could tell that the craftsmanship itself was actually impressive. The specifications of the weapon also matched well with the sword god's blessing. However, the hardness was still stuck at E rank. Even so, the knife still had the potential to become a good weapon. If it was reinforced properly, it could definitely turn into something useful. All Gyoma needed to do was bring the required reinforcement materials, and Volander would upgrade the weapon without charging any additional fees. Still, Gyoma wasn't satisfied. With visible frustration, he demanded to know what would happen if the weapon broke again. Volander nervously reassured him that even though it was currently E rank, it had the growth potential of an A rank weapon and could eventually become even stronger. There was also a special material known as Never Fail, which could guarantee that Murasame would become stronger, but that material could only be obtained from demonic beasts ranked A or higher. The problem was that A rank demonic beasts were on the same level as E rank demonoids, meaning that going after such material would be no different from asking Gyoma to fight something like the mermaid again. Risking his life just to reinforce a weapon was absurd, especially when even low-rank demons could drop usable reinforcement materials. Gyoma then demanded a promise, and Volander swore on his honor as a blacksmith, but that wasn't the end of it. Gyoma also insisted that Volander refund at least half the cost of the leftover scrap metal, which was worth around 10 million won. Volander refused, arguing that he had followed Gyoma's exact instructions when crafting the weapon, and had already agreed not to charge anything for the enhancement process. Gyoma countered that his B-rank sword had effectively been reduced to scrap, and considering the market value, his demand was completely reasonable. Volander tried to push back, but the sharp glint of the blade and the deadly look in Gyoma's eyes immediately shut him down. Realizing he had no way out of this situation, Volander attempted to negotiate the refund down to 500, but Gioma raised it to 1,000 instead. Even that amount was far too much for Valander, but Gioma refused to budge any further. At this point, it was clear that Gioma was fully prepared to extract value in other ways if needed. Faced with the choice between losing money or something far worse, Valander finally gave in and agreed to the price. Gioma heads to a lone bench on campus to take another look at his blessing. After obtaining a new weapon, his armament has increased, and additional options have become available. The biggest reason that he hesitated to use the Sword God's Blessing is because of the excruciating pain, but his new stats have reduced the pain by 1 level. It can be further leveled up, which means that leveling up his pain reduction should be his biggest priority. He tested it earlier, and although the pain is still unbearable, it went from feeling like he was about to die to feeling like he can barely breathe. Still, if just 1 level reduces the pain this much, then constant leveling means that he might one day be able to use the Sword God's Blessing without pain. It seems like armament increases when he obtains new weapons or enhances them. Now that the midterms are over, weapon enhancement should be his top priority to increase his levels. If he keeps growing at this rate, then he might finally be able to understand this power, or maybe he'll even figure out who threw him into this world. As he's eating lunch on the bench, someone sneaks up on him, causing him to startle out of his thoughts. It's Chloe, and it looks like her healing is going along smoothly. She even took off her cast, and Gioma asks her if her body is all right now. She still needs crutches to move around, but she already feels stronger than before. As they are talking, Gioma notices a crumb of rice on her face and reaches over to clean it up. The brief contact is enough to cause her to fall over from pure joy. But from the ground, she notices the murasami on the bench that Gioma was sitting on. This is the first weapon she has seen him with that isn't just some kind of kitchen utensil. So, it's a pretty big deal. He's still bothered by the fact that it's E rank, and although he got some money back from the blacksmith, he still needs to gather enough materials to enhance the weapon before it can become usable. There's no real reason for Gioma to get stronger. Ever since he cut down the mermaid, he has been able to handle mid-tier magical beasts. The main reason he wants to enhance the weapon is to reduce the pain. Chloe mistakes his thoughtful expression as him being disappointed by her mentioning that the weapon is E rank. She immediately decides, through perfectly reasonable yandere logic, that the blacksmith that made Gioma sad must die. Gioma snaps her out of it, but also notices that someone or something is watching them from close by. He walks over to a nearby tree and kicks it hard, causing an unexpected guest to fall down from it. It's Nox Editor, Chloe's brother, and he doesn't seem very happy that he was found. Chloe is prickly about him suddenly appearing, but Gioma can't smell any blood on him, and he doesn't seem to be armed either. However, he was following them, so there must be something that he wants. But Nox quickly clarifies that he isn't there for the usual murderous reasons. He came to warn Gioma that the Academy elders have requested for the Aditor family to get rid of him. Chloe confronts Nox and asks if that's why Nox came over, but he doesn't respond. Instead, he tells her that since she has been away from home for a long time, she has lost her edge. Chloe doesn't listen, and instead tells Gioma to get behind her so she can protect him. The two guys watch the slightly disabled girl desperately swipe at Nox from far away before Nox continues his warning. Nox doesn't care what Gioma has been up to recently, but the elders are oddly fixated on him. It's not just him either, but the whole Auditore family has a sense of unease, so they have temporarily postponed the request. They made the request in secret, and even bypassed the Academy head. However, since it's a direct order from the elders, it's hard to ignore. If the pressure continues, the family will have no choice but to investigate our MC. Regardless of the reason, since Chloe is a member of the Auditor, Nox felt like she needed to know this as well. That explains his motives clearly. He came under the pretext of family principles, but in the end, he was just worried about Chloe. With nothing else left to say, Nox turns to leave, but Gioma stops him for a moment. He wants to ask Nox about what he said last time about Chloe becoming weak while being with Gioma, but the red-haired older student turns around and continues to walk away. Even he can tell that Chloe is happiest by Gioma's side, and he decides to leave it like that. Even Chloe has never seen her brother act like this before. Before he leaves, he just tells Gioma to make sure that Chloe doesn't get hurt anymore. Gioma doesn't immediately understand, which only angers Nox more. Then Nox takes the opportunity to ask Gioma directly how he became so strong. Gioma seems surprised that he is considered strong. For someone to be strong in his opinion, then he should have the ability to withstand any threats at all times. Like the Sword Emperor, someone like Gioma who can only maintain that level of strength for less than a minute a day isn't a level where he can boast about his strength or even talk about it. Nox used Chloe as an excuse to reveal family secrets to him, an outsider, so there's no way Gioma can trust him to keep his mouth shut, so he decides to pick something to satisfy Nox. He tells the redhead that he lacks desperation. No matter how much of a skilled Nox is, there's a vibe that comes from someone who has real-world experience. If he stays cooped up in the academy, then he will reach his growth limit, so he has to go out first and gain real-world experience. If he continues working hard, then he will definitely gain something. That's about as much rubbish Gioma can spew out without sounding like he's lying through his teeth. So, he quickly gets up and walks away before Nox can ask any more questions. Back in class, the students were being taught about history and the nature of blessings. However, Gioma wasn't paying attention to the lecture at all, as his thoughts were completely occupied with the information that the Academy elders were targeting him. The elders of the Academy were descendants of 5 of Balor Joaquin's 7 disciples, a group that held immense influence not only within the Academy, but across the entire world. In the game, their role had always been to interfere with the protagonist for the sake of maintaining their own power and security, which was why players referred to them as the corrupt remnants. That was exactly what didn't make sense to Gioma. They were supposed to be targeting the main character, so why had their attention suddenly shifted toward him instead? He began writing down possible reasons that could explain why they would go after him. When he reviewed everything he had done since enrolling in the academy, he realized that he had indeed caused quite a bit of disruption. At this point, it almost felt like he was deliberately trying to stand out, even though that wasn't his intention. Still, none of his actions seemed significant enough to justify being targeted by the elders. One particular event stood out in his mind: the demonic mermaid he had fought on Scopuli Island. It was clear that the mermaid hadn't been targeting him at all, but rather Leon, who had been seen as an obstacle. Even though Medea had done her best to keep the entire incident hidden, the fact that Gioma had defeated the mermaid must have still reached the ears of the highest-ranking figures in noble society. And since the attack had been directed at Leon, who was considered a candidate for the hero, it implied something far more dangerous. It meant that someone among the elders, or possibly all of them, were collaborating with the demons. They hadn't just tried to interfere with Leon either, they had attempted to kill him. All of this pointed to the fact that they were willing to sacrifice both the Academy and humanity itself just to preserve their own authority. The entire situation was completely rotten to the core. Gioma knew that he could storm into the elders' chambers right now and cut them all down without hesitation, but he also understood that it wasn't the right time to act yet. However, when the time comes, Gioma will definitely cut them all down.